Hi everyone, welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. This is the place to open the mysteries of thrilling cases. In this video, we will go through a dramatic and equally tragic story that happened in Gangnam District, Seoul, Korea. This is an emotional case with twists and turns of love, jealousy, and family tragedy. Join me as we explore the truth behind this gripping story and the lessons we can learn from it. Now let's get started. The case begins in 2000 in Gangnam District, Seoul, South Korea, when Shin Mira and Yeo Seo-yeon, twin sisters born into a wealthy family, enter a turbulent life. Shin Mira, the older sister, marries Park Soo-jin, a poor but charming man. After they meet by chance and fall in love, their happy life lasted until 2002 when Yeo Seo-yeon returned from studying abroad. Attracted by Park Soo-jin's charm and jealous of her sister, Yeo Seo-yeon plotted to kill her sister to replace her position in the family. From there, a series of terrible tragedies took place, causing everything to collapse and leading to a tragic ending. Shin Mira and Yeo Seo-yeon are twin sisters, born in 1976 to a wealthy family in Bundang-gu, Songnam, South Korea. Although their faces and appearances are so similar that they are difficult to distinguish, their personalities are very different. Shin Mira, the older sister, is known as a gentle, intelligent, and thoughtful woman. She always lives responsibly, maintains family happiness, and is the pride of her parents. Meanwhile, Yeo Seo-yeon, the younger sister, stands out with her strong, determined, and ambitious personality. In 2000, Yeo Seo-yeon, the younger twin sister, decided to leave Korea to study abroad in order to pursue her dreams and find her own career. She was fully supported by her family to study at a prestigious university abroad. Meanwhile, Shin Mira, the older sister, stays in Korea and lives a peaceful life, preparing for a happy future with the man she loves, Park Soo-jin. Park Soo-jin is a 26-year-old man from a poor family in Seoul, South Korea. He is handsome, tall, and has a charming demeanor, making him the center of attention for many women, despite his difficult life. Every day, Park Soo-jin makes a living by selling bread on the roadside, making a living with his simple job. Despite his poor circumstances, he is an honest and hard-working person, constantly trying to change his fate. Park Soo-jin's life changes completely when he meets Shin Mira, a rich and beautiful girl. Their sincere love overcomes all the gaps in social status, leading to a happy marriage. The meeting between Park Soo-jin and Shin Mira began one day in June 2000, when Shin Mira, a wealthy young lady, happened to pass by the market where Park Soo-jin was selling bread on the side of the road. Amidst the bustling crowd, Park Soo-jin's tall and handsome appearance immediately caught her eye. Although he is just a bread seller, Park Soo-jin has a special charm that attracts Shin Mira. She approaches him by buying a loaf of bread, using that as an excuse to start a conversation. At first, Park Soo-jin is a bit reserved and shy because he is aware of the difference in status between him and the rich girl standing in front of him. However, Shin Mira was not arrogant or aloof. She started chatting in a friendly and open manner, making Park Soo-jin gradually feel more comfortable. The initial conversations were simple, revolving around his daily work, but soon developed into more frequent meetings. They strolled through the streets together, visited small cafes, and even went to fancy restaurants that Shin Mira invited him to. Over time, the two began to develop deep feelings for each other. Shin Mira was attracted to Park Soo-jin's honesty, kindness, and diligence, while he gradually opened his heart and accepted her love for him, despite the difference in circumstances and status. After a year of dating, overcoming all social prejudices, they decided to get married, starting a new life full of happiness. After a year of dating, overcoming differences in status and social circumstances, Shin Mira and Park Soo-jin decided to get married in June 2001. The wedding took place at a luxurious restaurant in central Seoul, delicately decorated with fresh flowers and sparkling lights, matching the bride's noble beauty and the groom's elegance. Although Shin Mira comes from a wealthy family, she is not ostentatious or aloof, but instead wants the ceremony to be simple and cozy with the participation of her closest loved ones. The ceremony was attended by family and friends from both sides. Shin Mira's parents were initially a bit skeptical about Park Soo-jin's situation, but given their daughter's sincere love for him, they accepted and supported the marriage. Besides, Park Soo-jin's family, despite their financial difficulties, still appeared in elegant clothes, expressing joy and pride in their son. However, Shin Mira's twin sister, Yoo Seo-yeon, was studying abroad at the time and could not attend. This made their wedding somewhat lacking, but Shin Mira and Park Soo-jin's happiness was still overflowing. The two exchanged vows and entered married life together amidst everyone's joy. After their wedding, Shin Mira and Park Soo-jin moved into a new house in Ilsan Town, Goyang. The house was carefully chosen by Shin Mira, not too luxurious but cozy, suitable for the life of a young newlywed couple. Their married life was initially very happy. Park Soo-jin continued her daily job selling bread, while Shin Mira took care of the housework and looked after the family. Although their financial situation was not yet abundant, their love and harmony helped the two feel fulfilled. Park Soo-jin always cherishes and loves his wife, feeling lucky to be married to a beautiful and affectionate woman like Shin Mira. She also fully supports her husband's work, always encourages and shares with him all the difficulties in life. The two often spend time together, enjoying warm dinners or walking around the quiet streets. However, things begin to change when Yoo Seo-yeon, Shin Mira's twin sister, returns after 2 years of studying abroad. On July 10, 2002, after 2 years of studying abroad, Yoo Seo-yeon, Shin Mira's twin sister, returned to Korea. She returned with a confident appearance, bringing with her new experiences from the outside world, but also a hidden feeling of jealousy and unease. When Yoo Seo-yeon stepped into her parents' familiar house in Bundang-gu, Songnam, she immediately noticed a change in the family. Her parents excitedly told her about her older sister, Shin Mira's happy marriage to a poor but kind husband, Park Soo-jin. This news surprised Yoo Seo-yeon because during her time studying abroad, she had no idea that her sister was married to Gukhui. Yoo Seo-yeon felt a mixture of joy at seeing her family again and jealousy that was hard to hide. She immediately called Shin Mira, wanting to meet her sister and her husband. Over the phone, Yoo Seo-yeon seemed very happy and invited her sister and Park Soo-jin to her parents' house for a small party to celebrate her return. Shin Mira, with her gentle nature and love for her sister, happily agrees without knowing that Yoo Seo-yeon's return will be the beginning of a bloody tragedy. When Yoo Seo-yeon first met Park Soo-jin at her homecoming party, her emotions immediately became chaotic. She entered the familiar house with a bright smile, but when she saw Park Soo-jin, her sister's husband, an indescribable feeling arose in her heart. Park Soo-jin, with his tall and handsome appearance, made Yoo Seo-yeon unable to take her eyes off him. Throughout the party, her eyes silently followed his every move, from the way he talked and laughed with everyone to the gentleness he showed Shin Mira. A wave of jealousy began to rise in Yoo Seo-yeon's heart. Not only was she envious of her sister's love and happiness, but she was also fascinated by the man her sister had married. These feelings were not just ordinary admiration, but gradually turned into a possessive and ambitious desire. In that moment, Yoo Seo-yeon formed a vicious thought in her mind. She wanted to have Park Soo-jin and the life her sister had. Although Yoo Seo-yeon tried to keep a calm and cheerful appearance on the outside, deep down, she was already planning to replace her sister. She knew that with her identical appearance to Shin Mira, no one would be able to detect her if she stepped into her sister's role. That night, after the party ended, Yoo Seo-yeon kept thinking about how she could achieve her cruel goal. On July 18, 2002, Yoo Seo-yeon visited Shin Mira and Park Soo-jin's home after being warmly invited by her sister. As she entered the couple's new home, her heart was filled with joy at seeing her sister again after a long time apart. But at the same time, she was filled with dark emotions. Shin Mira happily welcomed her sister, not knowing that Yoo Seo-yeon was hatching an evil plan in her heart. Shin Mira invited her sister into the house with a warm smile, happily leading Yu Seo-yun to tour every corner of the house that she and Park Soo-jin had built. While her sister was talking carefreely, Yu Seo-yun's jealousy grew. She not only desired the life her sister had, but also wanted to take her place. With the house and handsome husband she had been fascinated by since the first time they met, the two sisters sat chatting in the living room. Shin Mi-ra kept talking about her happy married life, while Yu Seo-yun just listened quietly. Although she still appeared friendly on the outside, Yu Seo-yun was already planning a cruel move in her heart. As the conversation dragged on, Shin Mi-ra invited her sister to stay for lunch and went into the kitchen to prepare the meal. While Shin Mi-ra was busy in the kitchen preparing lunch, Yu Seo-yun quietly took out the small bottle of poison that she had hidden carefully in her pocket. Her eyes were cold and determined as she opened the lid and dropped drops of colorless liquid into her sister's glass of water, which Shin Mi-ra had left on the table. Each drop of poison that fell down symbolized the cruelty and jealousy that had been ingrained in Yu Seo-yun's heart since the day she returned. After quietly carrying out her plan, Yu Seo-yun sat down on a chair and calmly waited. When Shin Mi-ra returned from the kitchen, carrying the food she had prepared, she did not suspect her sister in the slightest. She smiled gently and said, "Have some water. You must be thirsty." Yu Seo-yun also took a sip from her cup, but her calculating gaze did not leave her sister. As Shin Mi-ra picked up the cup of water to drink, within minutes she began to feel dizzy and uncomfortable. At first she thought it was just fatigue, but not long after severe pain set in. Shin Mi-ra felt as if her body was being suffocated. Her vision blurred, and she began to vomit blood. Her face was pale, her eyes panicked as she tried to look towards Yu Seo-yun for help, but all she got was a terrifying silence from her sister. Yu Seo-yun couldn't hide her satisfaction at that moment. She watched her sister roll to the ground, convulse, and die in pain. When Shin Mi-ra stopped breathing, Yu Seo-yun remained cold and unhesitating. After poisoning Shin Mi-ra to death, Yu Seo-yun showed no remorse or fear. She calmly took a sharp knife from the kitchen as if she had prepared herself, and began to carry out her plan to decompose her sister's body. In the quiet house, only the sound of the knife clanking and Yu Seo-yun's rapid breathing remained. She was cold and emotionless as she cut her sister's body into small pieces to easily dispose of the evidence. First she chopped off Shin Mi-ra's torso, starting with her head, then her arms and legs. Each violent slash echoed in the quiet space, as if expressing her sister's ruthless determination, even though the pungent smell of blood filled the air. But Yu Seo-yun continued her work with an expressionless face, her empty eyes focused only on each cut. After chopping up the body, Yu Seo-yun carefully placed Shin Mi-ra's body parts into large black plastic bags that she had prepared in advance. She put her sister's body in a suitcase and decided to throw it in a trash can far from home to avoid detection. Shin Mi-ra's head she buried deep in the vegetable garden behind the house, where few people passed by. Yu Seo-yun dumped the remaining limbs in an abandoned house in Wajongbu town, Zhangjiai, where she was sure no one would find them. After finishing decomposing her sister's body, Yu Seo-yun began to thoroughly clean up the scene. She used towels and disinfectant to wipe away the blood stains that were still on the floor, the kitchen, and the areas where her sister had collapsed. In the quiet space, Yu Seo-yun's concentration turned the house into a perfect crime scene with no trace of the horrific crime that had just occurred. To ensure that no foul odor would emanate from Shin Mi-ra's body, she used perfume and disinfectant to remove any suspicious signs. Yu Seo-yun did not leave any small detail unnoticed, from the smallest blood stains to the pungent fishy smell. After handling the scene, she sat down at the table, waiting for the moment when Park Soo-jin would return, filled with confidence that her plan would be perfect. As the sky darkened, Yu Seo-yun prepared dinner herself, as if everything was normal. She cooked the dishes that Shin Mi-ra usually made, hoping to create a sense of familiarity to fool Park Soo-jin. Despite her inner turmoil, she kept a calm face, believing that no one would be able to tell that she was not Shin Mi-ra. After a long day of work, Park Soo-jin returned home in the evening as usual. When he entered the house, the quiet and the aroma of a freshly prepared dinner made him feel comfortable. Yu Seo-yun, in her disguise as Shin Mi-ra, greeted him with a gentle smile, trying not to show any signs of strangeness. At first Park Soo-jin didn't notice anything unusual. He sat down and started eating dinner, chatting with his wife like any other day. However, after a while he began to feel that something was wrong. Although the woman sitting in front of him looked exactly like Shin Mi-ra, her demeanor was a little different. The way she looked at him, her answers were somewhat absent-minded, and unlike the gentleness and care Shin Mi-ra usually had, Park Soo-jin's suspicions gradually rose, but he tried to suppress them, not wanting to upset his wife after a tiring day at work. After the meal, when they returned to their room, the unusual feeling became more and more obvious. During their intimate moments, Park Soo-jin discovered an undeniable truth. The woman beside him is still a virgin, which is in complete contrast to the marital relationship he and Shin Mi-ra had. After Park Soo-jin discovers that Yoo Seo-yeon is not Shin Mi-ra, he is shocked and unable to believe what is happening. The woman in front of him, whom he thought was his wife, is actually an imposter, pretending to be his sister to take over the life she never had. At first he was speechless, his eyes shifting from disbelief to horror as he realized that this woman was not Shin Mi-ra, the wife he loved. Feelings of anger and disgust began to rise within him as he questioned Yoo Seo-yeon. Under Park Soo-jin's intense questioning, Yoo Seo-yeon could no longer hide it. In desperation, she admitted the whole truth. She killed Shin Mi-ra, her biological sister, out of jealousy and a desire to take over the life Shin Mi-ra had. She put poison in a glass of water, then chopped her sister's body into pieces to get rid of the evidence, then pretended to be Shin Mi-ra to live with Park Soo-jin. Yoo Seo-yeon's confession was like a fatal blow to Park Soo-jin's mind. He staggered, unable to believe that the woman in front of him had committed such a terrible crime, that the pain of loss, anger, and hatred surged through him all at once. His whole world collapsed when he realized that his beloved wife had been brutally murdered by his own sister. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, Park Soo-jin pulled out a gun from the drawer, his hand shaking as he aimed it at Yoo Seo-yeon. Even though she tried to beg for his forgiveness, Park Soo-jin's cold eyes clearly showed his decision. Unable to accept this brutal truth, he pulled the trigger. The gunshot rang out in the room, ending Yoo Seo-yeon's life on the spot. When the gunshot stopped, Park Soo-jin stood still holding the smoking gun in his hand. The house was filled with deathly silence, and he stared at Yoo Seo-yeon's motionless body, filled with pain and despair. When the gunshots rang out in the quiet night, Mrs. Lee, the neighbor who lived right next to Park Soo-jin's house, was startled. She was watching TV when the loud explosion frightened her. Sensing that something was wrong, Mrs. Lee quickly ran out the door and looked towards Park Soo-jin's house. Their door was still closed, but light was still coming from inside. There was no obvious sign of trouble except for the gunshot just now. Worried, Mrs. Lee hurriedly ran to Park Soo-jin's house and knocked on the door. After knocking for a long time and getting no answer, she began to feel that something really serious had happened. In a panic, she ran home and quickly picked up the phone to call the police. Her voice trembled as she described what she heard. Immediately after the call, police cars rushed to the scene with sirens blaring. Within minutes they were there, their flashing lights illuminating the quiet street. As the police arrived in front of Park Soo-jin's house, the flashing lights of the police car broke the silence of the night. The wailing sirens echoed through the deserted street, signaling to everyone that something serious had happened. The door of the house remained closed, but a faint light shone from inside, making the atmosphere even more tense. The police arrived and knocked loudly on the door, but no one answered. Realizing that something was wrong, they quickly broke down the door and entered the house. The scene before their eyes stunned the officers. Park Soo-jin stood still in the middle of the living room, his hands shaking as he held the gun. His eyes were blank and dazed, as if he had not yet fully realized what he had done. On the floor, Yoo Seo-yeon's body lay motionless in a pool of blood spreading all over the floor, creating a horrifying scene. The police quickly disarmed Park Soo-jin and handcuffed him, while another team examined the scene. No one said a word, only heavy breathing and a stifling atmosphere filled the house. Immediately, the police took pictures of the scene and collected all the evidence. The house that was once cozy had now become a place of sadness and guilt. Park Soo-jin's face was filled with panic, his eyes filled with tears, but he couldn't speak. He stood there, motionless like a statue, as the police led him out and into the car. At the police station, the atmosphere was tense as Park Soo-jin was led into the interrogation room. The cold light shone down on his tired and pale face. Park sat on a metal chair, his hands cuffed to the table, his eyes still blank, as if he had not fully understood what had happened. Outside the room, the sound of hurried footsteps of the police, the sound of papers being flipped in urgent conversations made the atmosphere even more stifling. A moment later, 2 policemen entered the room, their eyes stern. The chief, a tough-looking but calm policeman, sat down across from Park Soo-jin. He looked at him, trying to understand the man in front of him. Park Soo-jin, from an ordinary husband, now became a murder suspect, involved in a shocking case. Park did not answer immediately. His eyes were dull, staring into space in front of him. After a while, his voice was hoarse and weak. Park Soo-jin swallowed hard. His hands gripped the table tightly. His shoulders shook as he tried to tell the truth. With a broken and emotional voice, he began to recount the entire horrifying story from the time Yoo So-yeon, his wife's twin sister, returned from studying abroad, to the day he discovered the gruesome truth that Yoo So-yeon had murdered Shin Michigan RA and tried to impersonate his wife. In the cold interrogation room, Park Soo-jin's testimony resounded like a knife cutting through the air, filled with pain and regret. The police officer took notes of everything, while Park sank into panic and an unquenchable sense of guilt. End of interrogation. Park Soo-jin is escorted back to his temporary cell, where he will face trials and judgment for his actions, for the tragedy from which he can never turn back. The trial of Park Soo-jin took place on October 15, 2002, at the Seoul Central District Court, attracting great attention from the public and the media. The courtroom was packed, not only because of the brutality of the case but also because of the tragedy of a once happy family. Park Soo-jin, the husband and father, became a defendant on charges of murder. Testimonies, evidence, and the cruel truth about the deaths of Shin Michigan RA and Yoo So-yeon were all exposed to the light of justice. Park Soo-jin entered the courtroom looking tired, his eyes deep with pain and regret. He sat in the dock, facing the sharp gazes of the judge, jury, and prosecutor. His defense attorney tried to plead for a reduced charge, stressing that Park's actions were the result of desperation and loss of control after discovering the horrific truth about his wife's death. Before the trial began, Judge Eliza Moore, who presided over the trial, looked straight at Park Soo-jin and asked him to confess the whole story. His voice was shaky, but clear, as he recounted from the beginning. His happy life with Shin Nae-mi RA, Yoo So-yeon's return, and finally his discovery of the truth that it was Yoo So-yeon who killed his wife to take over his sister's life. The prosecutors, in their arguments, repeatedly emphasized that despite Yoo So-yeon's cruel actions, Park Soo-jin still had the opportunity to seek legal recourse, instead of ending her life himself. They accused him of acting violently and intentionally killing someone, arguing that this action was unacceptable and should be dealt with severely. Park Soo-jin's defense attorney argued that he was driven to the brink of death when he discovered the terrible truth about his wife's death, and that he was unable to control his emotions in a panic. They asked the court to consider Park's mental state at the time of the crime, when he was in extreme pain. Throughout the trial, the evidence of Shin Michigan Ra's death, the decomposition of her body, and Park Soo-jin's testimony about Yoo So-yeon's actions made the atmosphere in the courtroom tense and haunting. The families of the 2 victims, sitting in the back, could not hide their pain and tears as they heard the details of the tragedy. Ultimately, after several days of trial, Judge Eliza Moore concluded that although Park Soo-jin had been put in a painful situation, the act of murder could not be justified. She emphasized that the law must be enforced and that no one has the right to take another person's life into their own hands, regardless of the circumstances. With the evidence and mitigating circumstances considered, the court sentenced Park Soo-jin to 15 years in prison for murder while under extreme emotional stress. The decision brought to a close a tragic trial, but the pain and loss from the case still lingers in the hearts of the family and witnesses. Although the case has been closed with the conviction of Park Soo-jin, the pain and mystery still linger. After Yoo So-yeon was shot dead by Park in a fit of rage, part of the truth was buried with her forever. Although Shin Michigan-ra's body has been mostly found, some body parts are still missing and no one knows where they were hidden. Police searched for weeks, relying on previous statements and clues gathered at the scene, but Shin Michigan-ra's remains remained missing. With Yoo So-yeon's death, the mystery of where she hid her sister's body parts has been sealed forever. No one can provide further information and the case still leaves unanswered questions. Shin Michigan-ra's family, despite having received their daughter's body for burial, still live with the haunting knowledge that a part of her remains is still missing. For them, the pain is not only the loss of a loved one, but also the uncertainty that their daughter's body cannot be completely found. This mystery becomes a wound that will never heal in the hearts of those left behind. The case is over, but the truth is still not complete. Shin Michigan-ra's missing body parts are clear evidence of the cruelty and darkness of the human heart, as well as the secrets that will forever be forgotten with Yoo So-yeon's death. Story 2. In 2012, in a small, quiet town in Texas, the Coleman family, known for its quiet and reserved appearance, suddenly became the center of a bloody tragedy. A secret relationship between family members was gradually revealed, leading to an unstoppable chain of events. Behind the curtain of silence, dark secrets were exposed, causing everything to become dark and irreparable. Jessica Coleman, 38, was known in her community as a loving and devoted mother. However, inside her home, her life was not as happy as people thought. Jessica had been married to Richard Coleman for more than 20 years, but over time their marriage had become dull and boring. The early years of their marriage were happy, but Jessica and Richard's relationship began to change when Richard fell into a spiral of alcoholism. Richard, who had been the pillar of the family, now became cold and distant. Instead of spending time taking care of his wife and children and participating in family activities, he drowned himself in alcohol and neglected everything around him. Every time he came home, Richard was often drunk, no longer caring about Jessica's feelings or the family's situation. From a strong and responsible man, Richard became a careless and irresponsible husband, leaving Jessica to shoulder most of the responsibilities in the family. The distance between Jessica and Richard grew more and more. Jessica felt lonely in her own home. She felt like she was just a shadow of herself. No longer receiving love, care, and attention from her husband, she gradually became disconnected from the man she once loved. Their conversations became less frequent, and when they did, they often ended in heated arguments about Richard's drinking habits. Jessica's married life was filled with boredom and darkness. She felt trapped in a relationship that she no longer knew how to save. Her dreams of a happy family life and a caring, sharing husband were now a distant memory. Jessica felt increasingly lonely and trapped. On the outside, she maintained a strong appearance and tried her best to take care of her children. But on the inside, she collapsed under the pain and emptiness that her marriage had brought. Richard not only hurt Jessica mentally, but also emotionally. His indifference made her feel that she had no value in her husband's life. Jessica tried to talk to Richard about the need to change, but her efforts were rejected or ignored. Every time she confronted Richard, he just drowned himself in alcohol and refused to have any serious conversation. Richard's neglect and indifference left Jessica feeling lost. She had no idea what to do to save her marriage, and all her efforts were in vain. Jessica was trapped in a life without a way out, and although she loved her children, she could not deny that she was sinking deeper into loneliness and sadness. The affair between Jessica and Ethan began naturally and full of temptation. Ethan Mitchell, Jessica's son Jack Coleman's best friend, is a vibrant and energetic 22-year-old. Ethan often visits Jack's house and gradually becomes close to the Coleman family. Initially, Ethan is just a trustworthy and cheerful friend in Jessica's eyes, whom she sees as a second son. However, over time, the relationship between Jessica and Ethan begins to change. During Ethan's visits, Jessica and Ethan have small conversations. The conversations initially revolved around light topics, but gradually Jessica and Ethan began to share more about their personal lives. Jessica, who had felt lonely in her marriage to Richard, began to find comfort and empathy in her conversations with Ethan. He brought her the freshness and attention she had long craved but had not received from her husband. Ethan's friendliness and closeness gradually blurred the line between the two. Ethan, in his youthful enthusiasm, could not help but be attracted to Jessica. Although he knew that she was much older than him and was the mother of his best friend, Ethan could not deny Jessica's appeal. She was not only beautiful but also had a maturity that he had never found in his peers. Every time Ethan visited the Coleman home, he couldn't help but look at Jessica in a way he had never seen before. Their glances and smiles gradually became different, full of hidden meanings and emotions. At first, both tried to deny the development of their feelings. They knew that a relationship between Jessica, a married woman, and Ethan, a young man who was her son's best friend, would cause strong opposition from society and family. However, physical intimacy gradually became inevitable. Accidental touches and long, intimate conversations deepened the bond between Jessica and Ethan. Finally, unable to contain their feelings any longer, the two crossed the line of friendship. Jessica and Ethan's relationship was kept secret. They knew that if discovered, the consequences would not only be strong opposition from family and society, but also could cause serious harm to Jack, Jessica's son, who always considered Ethan his closest friend. Jack spent a lot of time with Ethan, and their friendship was built on a foundation of trust and understanding. For Jessica and Ethan, this makes their relationship even more tense and dangerous. They both have to hide their intense feelings whenever they are around each other in the Coleman household. Encounters with Jack or Richard become stressful, as they have to pretend nothing special is happening. At every glance, every gesture was hidden under the guise of family friendliness. But the more they tried to hide it, the more intense their feelings became. Both Jessica and Ethan knew that this relationship could not go on forever without being discovered, but they could not stop. With each private meeting, Jessica and Ethan felt like they were taking more risks. The thrill and excitement of keeping this secret makes their relationship all the more special. For Jessica, Ethan represents the youth and passionate love that she has long lost in her boring marriage. For Ethan, Jessica is a symbol of maturity and understanding, a woman he can't help but desire. Over time, Jessica and Ethan's relationship became more than just a series of secret emotional encounters. They were truly in love with each other, and their relationship grew deeper by the day. However, they kept it a secret, fully aware of the dire consequences if the truth were to come out. Jessica lived in constant tension, loving Ethan while worrying about her family, especially her son Jack. Everything changed when Jessica discovered she was pregnant. This shock not only left Jessica in shock, but also put her in a difficult situation with no way out. Being pregnant with Ethan, her son's best friend, was unacceptable in society and family. Although Jessica loved Ethan deeply, she knew that if the truth was revealed, it would not only destroy her marriage with Richard, but also seriously damage the relationship between Jack and Ethan. Jessica tried to handle the situation quietly, not letting anyone know about her condition. She tried every way to hide the signs of pregnancy, avoiding Richard and Jack from noticing anything unusual. However, the more she tried to keep it a secret, the greater the psychological pressure. Jessica knew that the truth could not be hidden forever, but she still did not know how to face reality. The truth began to gradually be revealed when Jack accidentally discovered unusual signs from his mother. Jessica found it increasingly difficult to hide the changes in her body and mood. Jack, though initially unsuspecting with the acumen of youth, began to realize that something was wrong. His mother's anxiety, insecurity, and other unusual behavior made Jack even more curious and determined to find out the truth. When Jack discovered that his mother was pregnant with Ethan's child, his whole world came crashing down. He stood there, stunned, feeling deceived and betrayed by the two most important people in his life. This terrible truth not only made him feel deeply hurt, but also stirred up a storm of uncontrollable anger in his heart. In the first moments after discovering the secret, Jack fell into a state of panic, not knowing how to react. In his mind, memories of his friendship with Ethan and his feelings for his mother kept spinning, intertwining, creating a sense of chaos. Ethan, his best friend, the person he always trusted, had an affair with his mother. Jessica, the mother he always respected and loved, now betrayed him by having an affair with his son's best friend. All these emotions were building up inside Jack, making him unable to calm down anymore. In his panic, Jack felt he could no longer keep quiet. He needed to confront them both to find answers to the questions that were burning his mind. Why Ethan? Why did his mother do that? His feelings of hurt and anger became the driving force that drove him to confront Jessica and Ethan. Jack could no longer contain his emotions and forced them both to face the truth. One tense evening, Jack couldn't take it anymore. His mind was like a raging storm, without a shred of rationality. Days of facing the painful truth about his mother's relationship with Ethan had driven him into a state of mental collapse. And that night, when he faced Jessica and Ethan directly, all the emotions that Jack had been trying to suppress all this time exploded like a fierce fire that could not be extinguished. As the three of them sat in the living room, the atmosphere became stifling. Everything around them seemed to shrink, leaving only the tense stares between Jack, Jessica, and Ethan. The air was heavy, angry words ready to explode. Jack, his face twisted in anger and pain, could no longer keep his composure. He stared at Jessica, then turned to Ethan, feeling like the whole world had betrayed him. Jessica, sitting nearby, tried to stay calm, but she was also panicking. She knew Jack had been pushed to his limit. Jessica saw in her son's eyes the disappointment, the resentment, the betrayal that she knew no explanation could assuage. She wanted to say something, to stop this confrontation before it got worse, but she didn't know where to start. Ethan, on the other hand, sat silently, confused and regretful. He knew he was wrong, but couldn't figure out how to face his best friend in this situation. Jack, unable to bear it any longer, began the confrontation with heavy accusations. He shouted, questioning Ethan about his betrayal, about how he had ruined not only their friendship but also his life. Each word stabbed Ethan, making him feel smaller and smaller and smaller in the face of Jack's anger. Ethan, still holding on to a glimmer of hope that he could defuse the situation, tried to say a few words of apology, but his words were meaningless in the face of Jack's fury. The argument escalated as Jack began to criticize his mother. He couldn't accept that the woman he loved and respected could do this. He felt like he had lost everything. Jack's words became harsh, stabbing both Jessica and Ethan like invisible knives. Jessica cried out in pain and regret, trying to apologize to her son, but Jack was no longer conscious enough to listen. Jessica stood up and walked towards Jack, hoping to stop his anger. She tried to convince Jack that things could be resolved differently, that his anger would only lead to greater tragedy. But Jessica's words could not penetrate the rage that filled Jack's heart. He could no longer hear anything but the sounds of pain and betrayal. Ethan, meanwhile, also stood up, starting to walk towards Jack in hopes of reconciliation. But this only made Jack angrier. Jack's rage reached its peak. In a moment of loss of control, he rushed towards the kitchen, where he grabbed a knife from the shelf. The next few seconds were absolute chaos. Jack, in a blind rage, lunged at Ethan with the knife in his hand. Ethan, unable to react, was stabbed in the chest by Jack. The pain from the stab made Ethan step back, his eyes wide with shock and fear. Jessica screamed in horror as she saw her son stab his best friend. She rushed forward, trying to stop Jack, but it was too late. Jack didn't stop. Rage had taken over his mind. He stabbed Ethan multiple times, each stab releasing all the pain, betrayal, and despair he had endured all this time. Each time the knife plunged into Ethan's body, Jack's anger seemed to grow. Ethan fell to the floor, blood everywhere. His breathing became rapid, then weak. He tried to hold Jack's hand, as a final plea, but Jack could see nothing but pain and hatred. Ethan gasped, trying to say something, but no sound came out. In just a few short seconds, Ethan was dead, and the room fell into a deadly silence. Jessica knelt beside Ethan's body, sobbing, but it was too late. She looked at Jack, but he stood there, stunned, his hands still clutching the bloody knife. Panic began to grip Jack as he saw what he had done. The knife fell from his hand, making a sharp sound as it hit the floor. He stood there, feeling the horror of his actions begin to creep into his mind. Jessica, in a panic, tried to wake Ethan up, but it was too late. The life had left Ethan's body. Everything in the Coleman household was completely broken. All Jessica and Jack were left with was a bloody room, a lifeless body, and indescribable pain. After the tragedy, the Coleman family home was engulfed in chaos and blood. Jessica was still kneeling over Ethan's body, broken and sobbing. Jack, after realizing what he had done, stood there, stunned, with his hands shaking, his best friend's blood on his clothes and all over his hands. An emergency call went off on Jessica's phone, who quickly contacted the police as everything happened so fast that she couldn't process it. A short time later, sirens wailed outside and the police arrived on the scene. They entered the house and were greeted by a tragic scene of bloody body lying on the floor, a woman on her knees crying, and a young man standing there, panicked and seemingly disoriented. The police officers immediately assessed the situation, moved in, and handcuffed Jack without encountering any resistance. He was arrested in a state of shock, his eyes vacant as if he had lost track of reality. Jessica, meanwhile, was questioned by the officers about her condition, but she was still too distraught to respond coherently. They left her sitting there, trying to regain her composure, while investigators began to collect evidence from the scene. They carefully gathered statements from Jessica and those involved, as well as recorded every detail possible for the investigation. Jessica's testimony, though full of pain, gave the police some insight into how the incident unfolded. She explained that Jack had discovered her illicit relationship with Ethan, and that he had been unable to control his emotions. The confrontation between the three exploded into tragedy when Jack lost control of his anger. However, Jessica also emphasized that Jack was not a violent person, and his actions were just an uncontrolled outburst in a moment of anger. For Jessica, this was not only a murder case, but also the complete collapse of her family. Meanwhile, investigators began interviewing neighbors who may have heard screaming and arguing coming from the Coleman home. Several witnesses reported hearing loud screams, crashing sounds, and then a deadly silence. This helped police confirm that the situation at the home had been tense before the tragedy occurred. When Jack was taken to the police station, he was still in a state of shock and could not believe what he had done. At first, when questioned, Jack tried to explain that he had acted in a fit of rage, not intending to kill Ethan. Jack claimed that everything happened too quickly, that he just wanted to confront Ethan and his mother for answers, but things got out of hand when he couldn't contain his anger. However, the investigation didn't stop at Jack's initial statement. The police conducted a deeper investigation, focusing on Jack's mental state in the days leading up to the incident. Through interviews with Jessica and those close to Jack, including friends of Jack and Ethan, they discovered that Jack had been showing signs of stress since before the incident. Several of Jack's friends said he had become withdrawn and depressed since discovering the truth about his mother's relationship with Ethan. This led police to suspect that Jack may have planned to confront Ethan in advance, rather than acting on impulse as he initially claimed. As investigators continued to investigate, they also discovered some unusual signs in Jack's behavior before the murder occurred. One of the key details is that Jack had been constantly searching for information on how to deal with stressful and violent situations in personal relationships on his computer. This further raises the suspicion that Jack may have thought about confronting Ethan beforehand, rather than simply acting out of anger. Throughout the investigation, Jessica also faces difficult questions about her role in the entire tragedy. Despite being the victim of her husband's lies and betrayal, as well as marital alienation, Jessica cannot escape responsibility for her own illicit relationship with Ethan that led to this tragic death. Feelings of guilt, grief, and regret constantly weighed on her mind, leaving Jessica in a constant state of torment. Meanwhile, Richard Coleman, Jessica's husband and Jack's father, remained an alcoholic and completely detached from family life. When the police came to investigate the family relationship, Richard had only a vague awareness of what was going on. His alcoholism and lack of interest in his wife and children's lives created a huge void in the family, contributing to the estrangement between Jessica and Jack. Richard was largely uninvolved in his wife's life and had no awareness of Jessica's affair with Ethan or even Jack's stress. Richard's long-term coldness and indifference contributed to the Coleman family's tragedy. Although he was not directly involved in the events that led to Ethan's death, Richard cannot deny his responsibility for the family's demise. He lived a life cut off from reality, neglecting all responsibilities, leaving only the suffering of those around him. Meanwhile, Jack faced a court where the truth about Ethan's death would be revealed. Jack Coleman's trial took place in late 2012. Jack's defense attorney argued that his actions stemmed from his psychological state and the shock of discovering the truth about his mother's relationship with his best friend. However, the prosecutor asserted that Jack was in control of his actions and had intentionally caused Ethan's death. Jack was ultimately sentenced to 20 years in prison for second-degree murder. The case ended with great pain for all three families and sparked debate about the impact of family relationships and betrayal in sensitive situations. Story 3. In the summer of 2007, in the peaceful town of Barrie, Ontario, Canada, a terrible tragedy occurred, shaking the entire community. One seemingly normal morning, Julie Thompson discovered her son, Nathan, lying motionless in his bedroom with unusual signs. This incident not only aroused fear in the hearts of the townspeople, but also led to a series of complex and haunting events, and only after a period of investigation, the heartbreaking truth gradually came to light. Julie Thompson was born and raised in a middle-class family in Barrie, Ontario, Canada. She is the only daughter in the family, raised by her parents in a fairly peaceful environment. From a young age, Julie showed herself to be an intelligent, sensitive, and enthusiastic girl. She had a special passion for art, especially painting and photography, but because her family's financial situation was not too good, Julie could not pursue her dream of going to art school. Instead, she decided to find a job right after graduating from high school to help her family. In her 20s, Julie started her first job at a retail store in the city center. Although the job was not her passion, it was enough to bring her a stable income. There, Julie gradually matured, learned to face the pressures of life and the harshness of society. She lived quite a closed life, did not have many close friends, but Julie always kept a resilient and optimistic personality. Although life is not easy, Julie always longs to find someone who loves her and can share the ups and downs of life. When Julie was 23 years old, looking for stability in her life, she unexpectedly met Robert Anderson, who changed her life at that moment. Robert was born into a working-class family in the suburbs of Toronto, Canada. As the eldest son in a family of 3 siblings, Robert had to shoulder many responsibilities from a young age. His parents worked hard to raise the family, but that also led to Robert lacking care and affection from them. Since he was a teenager, Robert showed a closed personality, rarely communicated with friends, and often had negative thoughts about life. Robert had little interest in studying. After graduating from high school, he decided not to go to university but instead went to work at a mechanical workshop near his home. Robert's job did not require much intelligence but required meticulousness and labor, which he could meet. He gradually became a good repairman, highly appreciated by his colleagues and superiors for his skills. However, Robert's life always lacked joy and personal satisfaction. Robert's personality became even more lonely when he saw his friends around him gradually getting married and settling down. He began to feel pressure from society and family, especially his parents' expectations that he must find a wife and start a family. In his heart, Robert always longed for a happy life, a peaceful family, but he did not know how to express his feelings and build relationships. Julie, a gentle and intelligent woman, was attracted to Robert's elegance, intelligence, and enthusiasm from the first meeting. He was not only an attractive man but also full of ambition and passion in his career, making Julie believe that she had found the perfect man to spend the rest of her life with. After several years of romantic dating, they decided to get married in 1995, with the blessing of family and friends. When they moved to Barry after getting married, Julie and Robert were looking forward to a fresh start, building a happy family and a stable life. In 1997, they welcomed their first child, Nathan, to great joy. Julie felt like she was living every woman's dream, with a perfect family and passionate love between husband and wife. However, reality is never as perfect as imagined. Although their feelings were deep at first, their married life began to show unexpected cracks. Robert's job, which had been his source of pride and motivation, gradually became more difficult. The pressure of work weighed heavily on his shoulders, causing him to fall into a state of constant stress and anxiety. Instead of finding ways to solve the difficulties, Robert began to change in a negative way. His warm and caring personality gradually faded, replaced by coldness and irritability. He no longer spent much time with his family, and when he returned home, Robert often took out his anger on Julie and Nathan. Arguments at home began to arise over small things. At first, disagreements about finances, work, or caring for Nathan quickly escalated into heated arguments. Julie tried to stay calm, hoping things would calm down, but the situation only got worse. Robert not only became cold towards Julie, but also began to behave verbally and sometimes physically. Whenever Robert got angry, he would throw things or smash things around, leaving both Julie and Nathan in fear. Julie tried many times to save the marriage because she still believed that, deep down, Robert was the good man she once loved. She encouraged him to attend marriage counseling sessions, to seek professional help to solve their problems, but Robert always refused, saying that there was nothing wrong with him. The love Julie once had for Robert was now replaced by anxiety and disappointment. She understood that she was not the only one suffering, but Nathan was also affected by the toxic atmosphere in the family. By 2004, after many years of suffering and unsuccessful attempts to heal, Julie decided to divorce. The decision was not easy for her, but Julie knew she had to protect herself and her son Nathan from an increasingly dangerous environment. Nathan, then 7 years old, needed a peaceful and stable environment to grow up, and Julie realized that Robert could no longer provide that. The court granted custody to Julie, and Robert was only allowed to see Nathan on weekends as agreed. After the divorce, Robert Anderson fell into a deep depression and lost direction. He was once a confident, ambitious man, but now all he felt was bitterness and disappointment. The marriage to Julie, whom he once loved, was now nothing but betrayal to him. The divorce not only caused Robert to lose his wife, whom he once considered his soulmate, but also caused him to lose control of his son Nathan, who was the most important thing to him. In Robert's damaged and distorted mind, Julie was the main cause of his life's collapse. Every time he saw Nathan, Robert felt the growing distance between father and son. He believed that Julie was trying to steal Nathan's affection, which he could not accept. Robert's resentment grew steadily as he saw his son on the weekends, and could clearly sense that Nathan was no longer as close and loving to him as before. Robert's sense of loss of control made him increasingly unstable. Anger flared in his mind, and instead of looking at his responsibility for destroying the family, Robert blamed everything on Julie. He began sending her hateful messages, threatening and blaming her for destroying everything. The messages became increasingly harsh, as Robert accused Julie of deliberately alienating Nathan and controlling his son's life. Julie, despite Robert's threatening messages, tried to maintain their father-son relationship. She understood that Nathan needed both a father and a mother, and did not want her son to be affected by the post-divorce feud. However, her efforts were not enough to calm Robert's anger. He sank deeper into a twisted state of mind, feeling that Julie controlled everything from Nathan's life to his parental rights. In Robert's dark mind, a terrifying thought gradually formed. He believed that the only way to get revenge on Julie, who he thought had taken his life, was to destroy the most precious thing to her, her son Nathan. For Robert, Nathan was not only his son, but also the last symbol of the love he had for Julie. But now, in his despair and anger, Robert no longer saw Nathan as an innocent child, but as a tool with which he could inflict the greatest pain on Julie. Robert began to think of cruel plans for revenge. In his mind, hurting Julie by taking away the person she loved most, Nathan's son, became a reasonable solution. Robert believed that only when Nathan was gone would Julie truly feel the pain he had suffered. For Robert, this revenge was not only about emotions, but also about justice for what he had lost. One evening in June 2007, Julie, as usual, made plans to go out to an event with friends. Nathan, now 10 years old, was home alone. Julie was not worried because Nathan was a smart and independent boy who was often home alone when she had work. Julie also checked the doors and gave her son careful instructions before leaving. What Julie could not have expected was that that night would be a fateful night, the night that would change her life forever. Taking advantage of the situation when Julie was not at home, Robert came up with the idea of carrying out the dark plan he had been hatching for so long. Robert knew that, according to the court agreement, he had no right to approach Julie's house without permission, but that did not stop him. In his twisted mind, Robert believed that this was his chance to get revenge on Julie by taking away the most precious thing she had, her son, Nathan. At dusk, Robert drove to Julie's house. Knowing that Nathan was home alone, Robert had no difficulty convincing the boy to open the door. Although their father-son relationship had become distant after the divorce, Nathan still loved his father and was not mature enough to realize the instability in his actions. When Robert offered to take him out, Nathan didn't think twice. He thought it was a rare opportunity to spend some quality time with his father. Robert takes Nathan out for a walk around town, stopping at a toy store that Nathan loves, and Robert buys his son a few new toys. To Nathan, everything seems normal, even a fun evening. But in Robert's mind, everything is going according to his terrifying plan. After an evening out, Robert takes Nathan home, with no indication of what's about to happen. That night, after returning home, Nathan is exhausted and falls asleep quickly. Julie still hasn't returned, and the house is completely silent. Robert, who has felt betrayed and out of control since the divorce, stands there watching his son sleep for a long time. In his mind, anger and resentment towards Julie boils. She took his son, took his fatherhood, and now he's going to take it all back. In a rage, Robert picked up the baseball bat, the one Nathan used for sports, and approached his son's bed. While Nathan slept, Robert hit him hard on the head with the bat, not once but several times. The blows were brutal and decisive, clearly showing the anger and despair that had built up inside him. Nathan had no time to react, nor did he know what was happening. It was all over in a split second, and Robert stood there, looking at his son lying motionless on the bed, blood dripping from his head onto the pillow. Robert, in a flash of realization, realized what he had done but felt no remorse. Instead, he believed that he had achieved what he had set out to do: destroy Julie's life, take away the person she loved most. The next morning, when Julie returned home from a party with friends, she had no idea that a terrible tragedy had occurred. When she entered Nathan's room, she saw a haunting scene: the boy lying motionless on the bed, blood flowing from a wound on his head. Next to him, the baseball bat that Nathan used to play sports with was now a murder weapon, covered in blood. Julie panicked. Her heart stopped beating. In that moment, she could not believe that her beloved son was no more. Julie immediately called the police and an ambulance in a panic, hoping that she could save her son, but all efforts were in vain. As soon as the police arrived at the scene and saw the brutality of the case, they immediately identified Robert Anderson as the prime suspect. Suspicion of Robert became apparent from the start, not only because of the strained relationship between him and Julie after the divorce, but also because of his suspicious behavior in the days leading up to it. Initial investigations quickly solidified suspicions when multiple witnesses reported seeing Robert near Julie's home on the evening of the tragedy. Neighbors reported seeing a man resembling Robert hanging around Julie and Nathan's home, and some even claimed to have seen Robert leaving the scene in a hurry. At the scene, police found numerous physical evidence of Robert's presence. His fingerprints were found on the baseball bat he used to kill Nathan. Footprints left on the floor by Robert's shoes also matched the type of shoes he usually wore, and there were signs of forced entry through the back door, although Robert had tricked Nathan into opening the door without forcing him. With all this evidence, the police had no doubt that Robert was the murderer. However, Robert quickly left the scene after committing the crime, causing the manhunt to become intense and last for several days. Knowing that he could not return to normal life and would certainly be hunted down, Robert began his journey to escape. He frantically moved through many different locations, using random means of transportation to avoid detection. He did not even dare to contact relatives or friends for fear that they would report him to the police. In a state of collapse and panic, Robert began to find a way to escape Canada, hoping that crossing the border would help him avoid being caught by the authorities. After several days of following clues, the police discovered that Robert had gone to a small hotel near the Canada-US border. Through checking the accommodation information, they determined that Robert had registered a room under a false name and tried to keep his whereabouts secret. But time was not on Robert's side. Police quickly surrounded the hotel in the early morning, and after a brief confrontation, Robert was arrested in a state of mental collapse. He showed no signs of resistance. On the contrary, when he was arrested, he appeared completely disoriented and had no will to resist. The police found Robert in a state of fatigue, sleep deprivation for days, and mental exhaustion. During the investigation, the police collected a lot of evidence from Robert's cell phone and computer. The threatening messages he had sent to Julie earlier played an important role in painting a complete picture of the motive for the case. These messages were full of resentment, hatred, and obsession with losing control over Nathan. In them, Robert constantly blamed Julie, claiming that she had ruined his life and made Nathan increasingly distant from him. In particular, some messages contained direct threats that he would make Julie pay for everything she had done. These messages became convincing evidence that the murder was not an act of sudden rage, but the result of a pre-planned plan. In addition, testimony from Julie's friends and relatives also helped the police gain a better understanding of Robert's psychological state in the time before the incident. They described Robert as a man who was once ambitious and confident, but after the divorce he gradually slid into feelings of resentment and hatred. Julie's friends recalled times when Robert expressed anger towards Julie in conversations, especially when talking about how he felt she had robbed him of his son's affection. These conversations, according to Julie's friends, became increasingly tense and extreme, signaling increasing instability in Robert's psychology. Many of them said they advised Julie to be careful and vigilant around Robert, but no one could have expected him to act so brutally. During the investigation, the police also discovered that Robert had a history of psychological problems but had never sought professional help. After the divorce, he becomes increasingly obsessed with how Julie destroyed his life, and this obsession gradually turns into thoughts of revenge. Psychologists involved in the case analyzed that, in Robert's mind, Julie was the source of all suffering, and Nathan, whom he once loved, gradually became a tool in his cruel revenge plan. After being arrested, Robert was taken to the police station for questioning. At first he was silent, neither admitting nor denying anything. However, under the pressure of clear evidence and relentless questioning from the investigators, Robert gradually admitted to all his actions. He recounted in detail the process that led to his decision to kill his son and how he carried out that brutal act. When asked why he chose to take revenge by killing his son, Robert coldly replied that he wanted to get his life back from Julie, and that he believed that she could only feel true pain when she lost the person she loved the most. Robert's testimony completed the horrifying picture of the case. With all the evidence collected, from fingerprints, traces at the scene, threatening messages, to Robert's own testimony, the police easily built a solid case to bring him to court. Robert Anderson's trial took place in late 2007, during which Robert remained silent, indifferent, and showed absolutely no remorse for his actions. This made many people feel indignant and horrified by his coldness. Witnesses, including Julie and her friends, gave clear testimony about the strained relationship between Julie and Robert after the divorce, as well as the threatening messages that Robert had sent to Julie before. All of this reinforced the evidence against Robert. It did not take long for the jury to reach a final verdict. Robert Anderson was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder, without the possibility of parole. This verdict was a fitting punishment for Robert's brutal actions, but nothing could erase the pain he had caused. Julie Thompson, after losing her only child, fell into a severe psychological crisis. The pain of losing her child changed her life forever, and she has to live with a wound that can never be healed. The case is closed, but its consequences continue to haunt many people. Story 4. On a dark evening in 2009 in Dallas, Texas, a seemingly perfect little family is thrown into a terrifying situation. The sudden death of Dorian Blackwood, a successful businessman, changes everything forever. Although initially thought to be a tragic accident in their luxurious home, strange signs begin to appear, raising unanswered questions. Inside the silent walls of the house, buried secrets are slowly revealed, sending the family's lives into an unexpected spiral. Dorian Blackwood, 26 years old, born into a middle-class family, Dorian did not have the privileges that many others had, but he always had a strong will and determination to rise up. From a young age, he began to learn about business and was especially passionate about real estate, where he saw opportunities to develop and change his life. After graduating from university, Dorian decided to pursue a career in real estate. He started with small projects, patiently building his reputation step by step. The first projects, although not bringing huge profits, helped him accumulate valuable experience about the market and build strong relationships in the industry. Dorian is known for his integrity and trustworthy work style. His clients trusted him not only for his appraisal skills, but also for the transparent and fair way he handled every issue. Over time, Dorian began to expand his influence. He not only succeeded in developing real estate projects, but also became an important figure in the Dallas business community. He participated in charitable organizations, business clubs, and became a familiar face at community events. His integrity and professional demeanor attracted many large investors, opening up many opportunities for his career. Despite his increasingly successful career, Dorian maintained a fairly simple lifestyle. He did not pursue lavish habits or flashy relationships. Dorian focused on work and family, always keeping himself calm and sober before the temptations of high life. For him, success was not only about finance, but also about maintaining moral values in every step. It was not until 2003 that Dorian Blackwood's life changed completely when he met Alara Morris at a business party organized by a mutual partner. Dorian, at that time a successful and influential businessman in the real estate industry, had attended countless important events. However, this party was different because it opened a new chapter in his life. Alara Morris, then 23 years old, was a gentle, charming woman, but also full of intelligence and courage. She works in marketing and has quickly made her mark with her creativity and deep understanding of the market. At the party, Alara not only attracted everyone's attention with her beautiful appearance, but also made a strong impression on Dorian with her confidence and charm in the way she communicated. Alara appeared very friendly and gentle, but also sharp when discussing work, which made Dorian admire her even more. From the first moment they talked, Dorian felt that Alara was special. He was attracted by her intelligence, understanding, and calm demeanor. Even though he was a busy man, he could not help but be fascinated by Alara's wonderful combination of beauty and intelligence. The feeling between them was not only an attraction in appearance, but also a harmony in thinking and outlook on life. Dorian, who has always been rational, this time feels he really needs to pursue something bigger than work and success, that is love. Alara also felt Dorian's sincerity. Unlike many other successful men she had met in her career, Dorian gave Alara a sense of warmth and security. His thoughtfulness and serious attitude made her believe that this was not just a fleeting relationship. Dorian was not only an excellent businessman, but also a man who knew how to appreciate and listen. This won Alara's heart, and she quickly accepted his feelings. Their love blossomed naturally and quickly. After only a few months of dating, Dorian and Alara felt a strong connection between the two. They shared with each other not only about work, but also about life values, dreams, and future plans. Both were in sync in their thinking about building a stable life, not only based on career success, but also harmony in family life. In 2004, after a year of passionate love, Dorian and Alara decided to get married. Their wedding was held splendidly at a luxury hotel, attracting the attention of many people in the business and media circles. Both families and friends came to congratulate the couple, because everyone thought that Dorian and Alara were the perfect couple, a combination of talent and charm. Dorian, with his brilliant career, and Alara, with her intelligence and ingenuity, created an ideal image of a successful and happy family. At the wedding, Dorian could not hide his happiness. He understood that meeting and falling in love with Alara was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Before that, he had everything a man could dream of in his career. But it was only when he met Alara that he realized what was really important: a sincere and loving companion. Alara was also radiant on her wedding day, happy to become the wife of the man she believed would be with her for the rest of her life. She felt lucky to meet Dorian, who not only loved her but also respected and shared her dreams and ambitions. After getting married, Dorian and Alara's married life was initially happy and full of hope. Dorian continued to achieve success in his real estate career, becoming one of the most influential figures in Dallas. Meanwhile, Alara, with her acumen, maintained her job in the marketing field and balanced her family life. In 2006, their joy multiplied when their little daughter Celia was born. With the appearance of Celia, Dorian and Alara became the ideal model of a happy and fulfilled family. However, beneath that perfect exterior, Alara gradually felt a big change in the relationship between her and Dorian. Since Celia was born, the difference in their views on life and family became more and more obvious. Dorian, with his relentless ambition in work, began to devote more time and energy to his career. New projects, long meetings, and business meetings took up all of his time, causing him to gradually distance himself from his family. Alara, on the other hand, felt abandoned in her role as a mother and wife. She had to care for Celia on her own during the first months of her life while trying to keep her marriage to Dorian alive. Although Alara loved her husband and understood that work was an important part of Dorian's life, she couldn't help but feel left out. Their conversations became rare, and when they did, they often revolved around disagreements about finances, work, and how to raise Celia. The conflicts in Dorian and Alara's marriage became more and more serious. The distance was not only physical but also emotional. Dorian spent most of his time working, continuing to pursue the big projects he had always wanted, while Alara felt that she was losing her place in her husband's life. All of Alara's efforts to improve the relationship fell on deaf ears as Dorian stopped paying her as much attention as before. The two often argued about work, finances, and how to raise their daughter Celia. However, Alara never thought that these conflicts would lead to such a tragic end. One fateful evening in 2009, Alara's life changed completely. Dorian died unexpectedly at home. Alara and Celia were not home that day. When Alara returned, she found the house quiet, an eerie feeling pervading the space. She searched for Dorian and found him lying motionless at the bottom of the stairs. Panic and despair gripped Alara as she called emergency services, but it was too late. Dorian was pronounced dead at the scene. Police immediately arrived on the scene to investigate. The initial report ruled the incident an accident. Investigators believed that Dorian had slipped and fallen down the stairs while he was home alone. There was no sign of a third person involved, and the house showed no signs of forced entry. The initial conclusion was that Dorian had lost his balance while descending the stairs, possibly due to fatigue or carelessness, leading to his fatal fall. Alara, in a state of extreme grief, accepted this conclusion without question. She was completely overwhelmed by the loss, unable to believe that the husband she had loved for many years and the father of her daughter had been gone so suddenly. Although the conflicts between the two in the marriage caused a lot of tension, Alara never expected Dorian's death to come so quickly and unexpectedly. Dorian Blackwood's funeral was solemn and emotional. The funeral home in Dallas, where the ceremony took place, was packed with the presence of family, friends, and colleagues. The atmosphere was filled with grief, mixed with shock at the sudden departure of a man at the peak of his career. Alara, his wife, was carrying the utmost pain in her heart, standing silently beside her husband's coffin. She could not take her eyes off his face, now motionless, cold in the coffin decorated with solemn flowers. Alara wore a black dress, her face pale and her eyes tired. Even though she was surrounded by so many people, She still felt lonely, as if she had lost her only support in life. Beside her was Celia, her little daughter, who was too young to understand the loss, but could feel the heavy, tragic atmosphere. Celia held her mother's hand tightly, her eyes bewildered by this scene. Friends and family came to comfort Alara, but she seemed to no longer be aware of everything around her. The pain of losing her husband overwhelmed everything. Condolences and sympathetic looks could not seem to fill the void left by Dorian. Throughout the ceremony, there were only sighs and tears streaming down the faces of relatives and friends as they said goodbye to Dorian, a successful man, husband, father who had left too soon. A few months after Dorian's sudden death, Alara and her little daughter Celia began to try to get used to life without her husband and father in the family. One day, when mother and daughter were cleaning out Dorian's closet, which was filled with memories and traces of him, they could not have imagined that a shocking secret was about to be revealed. Celia, now 10 years old, was curious about her father's belongings and accidentally knocked an old photo out of a drawer. The photograph shows Dorian and a woman Alara does not recognize. Behind the photograph, there is a small piece of paper that has been hidden for a long time, discolored by time. When Alara opens the paper, she discovers that it is a handwritten letter signed by a woman named Celine Foster. The letter is written affectionately and suggestively, revealing that Celine and Dorian have had a secret relationship for many years. In the letter, Celine tells of their encounters and the strong feeling she has for Dorian. She also mentions that the two of them planned to run away together to escape the life Dorian felt trapped in with Alara. In a poignant passage, Celine wrote Dorian, "I can't wait any longer. We need to do this for ourselves. You said you were leaving Alara, but when? We have to start the new life we've always wanted." Reading these lines, Alara was shocked. It felt like the ground was crumbling beneath her feet. She had never doubted Dorian's loyalty, even though recent conflicts had strained their relationship. But discovering that he had been having an affair for years, and that he intended to leave her sent Alara into a storm of emotions. The letter not only proved Dorian's betrayal, but also raised a series of questions about his death that she had never considered before. Alara did not stop there. Confused and suspicious, she began to dig through Dorian's papers, hoping to find answers to what the letter had revealed. After hours of searching, she discovered a number of strange invoices related to secret financial transactions. These invoices were not related to the couple's joint accounts, but appeared to come from a hidden account that Dorian had kept secret. The more Alara examined, the more she realized that Dorian had recently made several large expenditures, including transferring money to an overseas bank account. These suspicious financial transactions only made Alara more suspicious about Dorian's death. She had previously accepted his death as an accident, but now, with what she discovered, things seemed to be more complicated. Why was Dorian so secretive about his finances? And what role did his relationship with Celine Foster play in all of this? Alara begins to think that perhaps Dorian's death was not a simple accident as the police initially concluded. The affair, the secret financial dealings, and Celine's letter all opened up the possibility that Dorian might be involved in a darker plot. Was he being framed for money or love? Or was there something he was hiding? With growing suspicion, Alara decided to dig deeper. She searched for more information about Celine Foster, but there weren't many leads. Celine had no outstanding records that Alara could easily find. Dorian had kept everything about her hidden. This only led Alara to believe that Celine was more than just a mistress, and that she might be involved in bigger secrets that Dorian had kept hidden throughout their marriage. Alara decided to contact a lawyer, not only to look into Dorian's suspicious financial dealings, but also to look into his death. She wants to know if the investigation into her husband's death can be reopened, and if these new findings can prove that it was not an accident. However, Alara also knew that finding out the truth could cause more damage to herself and her daughter Celia, but she could no longer live with doubt and unanswered questions. Alara submitted new evidence to the police, and a new investigation was opened. Initially, Dorian's death was ruled an accident, but with the information Alara provided, the police began to review every aspect of the case. Investigators conducted a thorough review of forensic evidence from the scene and discovered new details, especially about the bruises on Dorian's body. According to forensic experts, the bruises were not consistent with a normal fall down the stairs. Instead, they showed that Dorian may have been attacked before he fell, especially some bruises on his wrists and chest. These signs raised suspicions that he may have been pulled or pushed, leading to his fatal fall. This is in stark contrast to the initial conclusion that Dorian fell due to carelessness. Additionally, investigators have begun to look closely at the funds Alara discovered in Dorian's secret financial transactions. The transfers from Dorian's personal account were made in multiple batches, to accounts in countries where tracking and tracing were difficult. These transactions were not just small amounts, but involved significant amounts of money, enough to raise suspicions that Dorian might be involved in shady business activities. Armed with information from these transactions, the police began to expand their investigation to not only focus on Dorian's romantic relationship with Celine Foster, but also on the shady business partners with whom he had been associated. Through further investigation, the police discovered that Dorian was not only associated with Celine, but also with a number of unknown business partners who were suspected of engaging in illegal financial activities. These individuals were not only involved in fraudulent transactions, but were also involved in other criminal cases. In particular, one of the prominent business partners in Dorian's dealings was Jericho Maddox. Jericho Maddox is a familiar name in the world of financial crime. He has a criminal record for financial fraud and is suspected of being involved in a number of major scams in many places. According to investigators, Jericho had been involved in several secret dealings with Dorian in recent years. The two appeared to be closely linked in several projects, but these activities were not made public. As police continued to trace Dorian's bank accounts, they realized that the money being transferred overseas was directly or indirectly linked to Jericho. This led police to suspect that Jericho may have played a role in Dorian's death. Upon further investigation of Jericho, they discovered that he was not only a business partner, but also someone with a strong financial motive for harming Dorian. Jericho's previous fraudulent dealings had resulted in large debts, and he was looking to solve the problem by seizing Dorian's assets. During the investigation, the police also found more evidence, suggesting that Celine Foster was not only Dorian's lover, but also an important link in Jericho's plan. Celine used her relationship with Dorian to manipulate him and draw him into shady deals that he was not fully aware of. She not only helped Jericho plan, but also played a role in luring Dorian into believing that they would have a future together, causing him to let his guard down against the dark plots that were slowly forming. Finally, with the strong evidence collected, the police arrested Jericho Maddox. After many days of investigation and interrogation, Jericho was charged with being directly involved in the murder of Dorian Blackwood. Jericho, faced with undeniable evidence, admitted his role in orchestrating Dorian's death. He admitted that his plan was to seize Dorian's assets and leave the country with the money. Jericho teamed up with Celine to carry out the murder, and they planned it in advance, taking advantage of Celine's relationship with Dorian to lure him into a trap. Celine, as Jericho's lover and accomplice, helped convince Dorian that his marriage was doomed, leading him to believe that he would elope with her. As the murder plan was carried out, Celine acted as the instigator and facilitator for Jericho to commit the crime. The case quickly became a public trial. The mystery and brutality of Dorian Blackwood's death captivated the public, and the trial became a major event. During the trial, both Jericho Maddox and Celine Foster were charged with conspiracy to commit murder. Incontrovertible evidence, from shady financial dealings to Celine's role in seducing him, was presented to the court. Jericho, the mastermind behind the entire plot and the mastermind of Dorian's murder, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This sentence reflects the severity of the crime he committed, not only stealing property but also destroying the lives of many people. Celine Foster, Dorian's lover and accomplice in the plot to assassinate Dorian, was sentenced to 25 years in prison as an accessory to crime. Although Celine did not directly cause the death, her role in manipulating and assisting Jericho in the plot was enough to warrant a severe sentence. After the case was closed, Alara and her daughter Celia, despite finding out the truth, could not avoid a great mental shock. Dorian's death and the secrets he kept from them left deep wounds in the hearts of both mother and daughter. In the end, Alara decided that they needed a new start. She and Celia left Dallas, choosing another city to start their lives over, trying to leave the painful past behind. Story 5. This audio recording captures the heart-wrenching anguish of a mother upon learning that her 19-year-old daughter was brutally murdered. 19, the most vibrant age of life, stolen in a cruel, merciless act. In the summer of 2013, the small town of Hartford, Wisconsin, was plunged into shock by a horrific murder. Jessie Blodgett, a talented and spirited 19-year-old with a strong social media presence, known for her warmth and kindness, had just delivered a captivating performance in a local musical theater production. But mere hours later, she was found lifeless in her own bedroom. Initially, it seemed like a random break-in gone deadly. But as the police dug deeper, a chilling truth began to unravel. The prime suspect was none other than Daniel Bartelt, a close friend and even a former boyfriend of Jessie's. Not only was he present at the crime scene, but he had previously attempted to attack another woman, though unsuccessfully. What drove a seemingly intelligent young man with a promising future to become a cold-blooded killer? How did he orchestrate this heinous crime? And what secrets lay buried in the wake of Jessie's death? Hartford, a tranquil town in southeastern Wisconsin, USA, was once a cradle of the early automotive industry. Known for its sparse population and impeccable safety, residents often left their doors unlocked without a second thought. Yet, in this peaceful enclave, a gruesome murder shook the community to its core. The victim was Jessie, the only daughter of a loving, tight-knit family. From a young age, Jessie displayed a remarkable talent for singing and dancing. By high school, she not only excelled in performance but also composed her own music. Beautiful and gifted, Jessie quickly became a local star. Yet, she remained humble, treating her friends with genuine kindness. Her home was a familiar gathering spot for her close-knit group of friends. Jessie was a free spirit, passionate about peace and deeply engaged in social causes like animal welfare and ending domestic violence. She frequently volunteered for charitable initiatives. After graduating high school, Jessie enrolled at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where she continued to shine musically and earned a scholarship. Her teachers and peers believed she was destined for greatness as an artist. In the summer of 2013, Jessie started a music class at her home where the delicate notes of piano and violin filled the air, played by the children she taught. She believed music had the power to soothe the soul, even if it couldn't change the world. Her classes quickly gained popularity, with nearly 30 parents enrolling their children. On the morning of July 15, 2013, before dawn had fully broken, Jessie's father hurriedly left the house. Around 8:15 a.m., Joey, Jessie's mother, brought freshly laundered clothes to her daughter's room. Seeing Jessie still fast asleep, buried under her blanket, Joey gently placed the clothes down and quietly left. Jessie wasn't one to sleep in, but she had performed in a local theater production the previous night and joined a celebratory party until 1 a.m. Her sleeping late seemed understandable. By 12:30 p.m., Joey returned home for lunch. She called out to Jessie but received no response. Assuming her daughter was still sleeping, she climbed the stairs and opened the bedroom door. Jessie lay still under the blanket. Approaching the bed, Joey gently shook her daughter, but there was no response. A sinking dread gripped her. Pulling back the blanket, Joey was met with a horrifying sight that left her frozen. Jessie's skin had turned a ghastly pale blue, her body cold to the touch. In a state of utter panic, Joey frantically called the police. That was the agonizing call you heard at the start. Paramedics and police arrived swiftly at the scene. Medical personnel confirmed Jessie had passed away. Joey couldn't comprehend it. How could her daughter be gone after a single night's sleep? Initial examinations revealed marks on Jessie's suggesting she had been bound. A deep bruise encircled her neck, evidence of strangulation. This was no accident. The police suspected the killer had silenced Jessie to prevent her from crying out. After gathering evidence, Jessie's body was sent for a forensic autopsy. The crime scene presented puzzling anomalies. The doors and windows were intact, showing no signs of forced entry. The house was undisturbed, with valuables untouched. Jesse's room showed no signs of a struggle. This ruled out a robbery-turned-murder. However, Jesse's bed was in disarray, with items scattered and her hair and clothes damp. Joey, her mother, insisted Jesse was meticulous and would never leave her room in such a state or sleep in wet clothes. The police suspected the killer may have washed the body after the crime, indicating familiarity with the house and its routines. Under the bed, investigators found a roll of duct tape bearing unfamiliar fingerprints. Jesse's parents confirmed they had never purchased that brand of tape. It was likely a critical piece of evidence the killer had carelessly left behind. During the search, police discovered Jesse's diary. The final entry, written just hours before the murder, mentioned two suspicious men: an older co-worker from the restaurant where Jesse worked part-time, and a middle-aged man at the previous night's party. Both men, around 40 years old, had harassed Jesse at the event, and even argued over her. However, after investigation, both had solid alibis and were cleared as suspects. The police expanded their investigation, tracing Jesse's social connections. Her family was well-liked and had no known enemies. The case hit a dead end, shrouded in darkness. But just as the Hartford police grappled with the mystery, a spark of light emerged from a nearby precinct, revealing a critical clue that would soon crack the case wide open. 3 days before Jesse's murder, on the morning of July 12, 2013, around 9:45 a.m., in the town of Richfield, roughly 12 miles from Jesse's home, a young woman named Melissa Etzler was attacked by a stranger while walking her dog in a park. The weather was swelteringly unbearable that day. After about 30 minutes of walking, Melissa headed back to her car to grab some water. As she approached the parking lot, she heard rapid footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw a well-dressed man approaching. Initially, she thought nothing of it, assuming he was just passing by. She offered a polite smile and a casual greeting before continuing on. But suddenly, the man pulled out a knife and lunged at her. Melissa was knocked to the ground. Instantly, she realized she was in grave danger. Acting on instinct, she grabbed the blade with her bare hands, a reckless but desperate move to fend off the attack. The assailant, caught off guard by her resistance, struggled with her. After about a minute of grappling, perhaps fearing discovery, he bizarrely demanded that Melissa return his knife. She refused outright. The man then claimed he would leave if she didn't hand over the weapon. Fueled by adrenaline, Melissa retorted that he wouldn't get away so easily. She instantly regretted her words, fearing they might provoke him further. But to her surprise, the assailant panicked, turned, and fled, leaving the knife behind. He jumped into a green Dodge and sped off. Stunned for a moment, Melissa quickly regained her composure, set the knife down, drove herself to a hospital, and reported the incident to the police. Her hand was deeply cut, blood pouring from the wound. She provided a detailed description of the attacker and his vehicle, a green Dodge, though she couldn't make out the license plate. She was certain, however, that the assailant's hand was also injured during their struggle. Based on Melissa's account, the Richfield police concluded the attacker was likely an amateur. Standing at 6 feet 1 inch and weighing nearly 190 pounds, about 86 kilograms, a seasoned criminal would have easily overpowered a woman like Melissa. The police sketched a suspect profile and launched a widespread search for leads. A breakthrough came when a local officer recalled a critical detail. Weeks earlier, he had noticed a suspicious green Dodge parked in the same lot where the attack occurred. Following a hunch, he had jotted down the license plate and checked it in the system, suspecting the car might be stolen. This lead proved invaluable. The police traced the plate to a middle-aged couple who didn't match the suspect's description. However, they had a 19-year-old son named Daniel Bartelt, who fit Melissa's description perfectly. At around 5 p.m. on July 16th, a day after Jesse's death, the Richfield police called Daniel, requesting his presence at the station for questioning. In a chilling coincidence, Daniel was at Jesse's house when he received the call. Yes, Daniel and Jesse were close friends. Upon hearing of her death, he had visited to console her grieving parents. Two seemingly unrelated cases, yet Daniel was connected to both. During questioning, he vehemently denied attacking Melissa in the park, despite a cut on his hand. He claimed it was from a work accident, but the police discovered Daniel had dropped out of school months earlier and returned home. After his parents' objections, they insisted he find a job to pay rent. Daniel claimed he had secured a job as a mover, working 4 days a week, often leaving early and returning late, but the investigation revealed otherwise. Each day, Daniel took the family car not to work, but to wander aimlessly, returning home at the usual time. When confronted with this lie, he changed his story, claiming the cut was from a cooking mishap at home, a flimsy excuse. After intense questioning, Daniel finally admitted to attacking Melissa in the park. His reason: he had been gripped by fear of life lately and wanted others to feel that same terror. The attack on Melissa Etzler had been solved, but the killer of Jesse Blodgett remained a mystery. During continued questioning, Daniel calmly stated that the previous evening, he had visited Jesse's home to pay his respects to his late friend. The murder had sent shockwaves through the community, yet Daniel's responses were strikingly detached. Suspicion arose when it became clear that the forensic report detailing Jesse's cause of death had not yet been released. So how did Daniel know Jesse had been assaulted? From the outset, both Jesse's family and the media had only mentioned strangulation with no reference to any assault. Days later, the forensic report confirmed Jesse was strangled to death with a rope, causing asphyxiation. Semen found in her body revealed she had been violated before her death. Unknown skin under her fingernails indicated a fierce struggle. Clearly, Daniel's offhand remark had made him the prime suspect in Jesse's murder. This revelation stunned Daniel's friends and family. Even Jesse's parents and friends were reeling. Daniel, a talented young man, had been Jesse's close friend since high school. They shared a passion for music and theater, and had once been a couple. Their romance ended when Daniel broke it off, but they maintained a strong friendship afterward. Daniel later enrolled at the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point with stellar academic achievements, causing them to lose touch for a time. They reconnected that summer. Daniel frequently visited Jesse's home, where they collaborated on music and shared it on social media. Just before her death, they performed together in a theater production. To everyone, Daniel was a vibrant, optimistic, and idealistic young man with no apparent motive to harm Jesse. Daniel claimed that on the morning of Jesse's murder, he drove to Woodlawn United Park, miles away, to read and work on a novel. He returned home after a few hours. He admitted to growing closer to Jesse recently, but insisted they were just friends with shared interests, with no animosity between them. Police investigated the park Daniel mentioned, and horrifying clues began to surface. Surveillance footage near the men's restroom captured Daniel leaving the park at 10:25 a.m. on the day of the murder, carrying a backpack. Compared to earlier footage, the backpack appeared noticeably deflated, raising suspicions that he had discarded something. A thorough search of the park's trash bins uncovered a cereal box near the entrance. Inside were blood-stained tissues, disinfectant wipes, duct tape, 2 climbing ropes, a makeshift gag, and a SpongeBob beach towel with bloodstains. The park manager confirmed the bins were last emptied before 8 a.m. that day, ruling out the possibility that the box was discarded earlier. A search of Daniel's car and home revealed more damning evidence. The car contained cereal matching the park's box, bloodstains, a laptop, and books. His bedroom held a SpongeBob fabric bag and the clothes he wore during Melissa's attack, stained with blood. The garage contained ropes identical to those found in the park and duct tape matching the brand found under Jesse's bed. Forensic analysis was conclusive. Daniel's and Jesse's DNA were found on the duct tape, climbing ropes, and gag in the cereal box. The ropes matched the marks on Jesse's neck and limbs. Daniel's fingerprints were on the duct tape under her bed. DNA from the skin under Jesse's nails and the semen in her body belonged to Daniel. Blood on his clothes and car matched Melissa's. Police also identified a witness after canvassing Jesse's neighborhood. The witness reported that around 8 a.m. on the day of the murder, while visiting a relative in Jesse's neighborhood, she noticed 2 cars parked outside Jesse's home, a silver one and a blue one. By 10 a.m. when she left, both cars were still there. The silver car belonged to Jesse and the blue one likely belonged to Daniel. With this overwhelming evidence, Daniel was almost certainly the killer. But why would someone with no criminal history murder his former girlfriend and close friend? After further investigation, police believe Daniel's motives stemmed from twisted desires within his psyche. Before college, Daniel was as talented and celebrated as Jesse, but university life fell short of his expectations, leading him to drop out, consumed by frustration and disappointment. Back home, parental pressure to work and pay rent pushed him further, yet he refused to comply. Instead, he pretended to go to work each day to save face. From a golden boy, Daniel became a disillusioned young man with no money or job. To fill the void in his soul, he turned to violence and depravity. Police discovered extensive searches on Daniel's laptop about serial killers, including lists and details of their crimes. He frequently watched violent adult films involving bondage and graphic murder. As his dark desires consumed him, the virtual world no longer satisfied his warped cravings. He decided to bring his crimes to reality. Daniel's first target was Melissa, alone in the park with her dog. Her bravery thwarted his plan. To ensure success, he turned to Jesse, someone he knew and trusted. Familiar with her home, he knew how to enter undetected. He subdued, assaulted, and killed her, then attempted to clean the scene and wash her body to erase evidence. During interrogations, Daniel persistently denied his crimes. But faced with irrefutable evidence, he could not escape justice. A year after the horrific crime, Daniel Bartelt faced justice, charged with the murder of Jesse Blodgett and the assault on Melissa Etzler. Despite his denials, undeniable witness testimony and physical evidence led the jury to deliberate for only 3 hours before finding Daniel Bartelt guilty of first-degree murder in Jesse's death. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, ensuring he would pay for his crimes behind bars forever. For the assault on Melissa Etzler, under a plea deal, Daniel was sentenced to 5 years in prison, to be served consecutively after his life sentence. Since he was already serving life without parole, this additional sentence had no practical effect. At the trial, Jesse's father, choking back tears, shared the family's months of agony, rage, and hatred after losing their beloved daughter. Yet, after countless sleepless nights, they chose to rise above the darkness and find light again. They could not forgive Daniel's actions, but chose forgiveness and love. Jesse's father told Daniel that, despite their forgiveness, he showed no remorse or admission of guilt. After the trial, Daniel was sent to Waupun Correctional Institution in Wisconsin to serve his sentence. Jesse's parents transformed their grief into strength, founding the Love is Greater Than Hate charity, spreading a message of love over violence and condemning male violence against women. They believed this was what Jesse would have wanted. This case is a heartbreaking tragedy, prompting reflection on motives, criminal behavior, and forgiveness. Daniel, a once talented young man, spiraled into despair and dissatisfaction, leading to ruthless acts of violence. His desire for power, frustration, and need to satisfy warped desires drove his crimes. His meticulous planning and attempts to cover his tracks revealed his cruelty and calculation. The police's efficiency in gathering evidence and using modern forensic techniques was crucial in bringing him to justice. The Blodgett family's forgiveness reflects profound compassion and the power of love, serving as a powerful statement against violence. This case reminds us that violence can strike anywhere, by anyone. We must recognize warning signs of psychological and behavioral changes, especially in those at risk. When facing mental struggles, seek help from family, friends, or professionals. Monitor exposure to violent online content to avoid negative psychological impacts. Build a safe community where everyone feels loved and supported. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting crimes, but choosing to let go of hatred to heal. Spread love and kindness to create a better society. Story 6. This is the final message sent by victim Tramai to her mother from inside the doomed container. In the frigid darkness of a remote industrial estate, British police were stunned to discover 39 Vietnamese migrants lifeless inside a refrigerated lorry container. No one could have imagined that a journey promised as a life-changing opportunity would turn into a harrowing voyage to death. The scene left behind heart-wrenching traces. Claw marks on container walls, stifled cries for help, and, illuminated on one victim's phone screen, a desperate message. "I'm sorry, Mom. I can't breathe." The case sent shockwaves across the globe, launching a breathless investigation to uncover the horrific truth behind this tragic mass grave. Now, let's turn back the clock to 2019 to uncover the story behind this devastating tragedy. The incident took place in the United Kingdom in 2019, at a time when the nation was grappling with the complex issues of illegal immigration and human trafficking. The UK had previously witnessed similar tragedies, such as the deaths of 58 Chinese migrants in a lorry in Dover in 2000. Despite tightened border controls, smuggling networks continued to operate in the shadows, exploiting the economic desperation of many Asians seeking a better life. In 2019, immigration was a burning issue as the UK prepared to leave the EU, Brexit, intensifying scrutiny on border control and migration. Yet, this very scrutiny drove many to risk everything to enter the UK through transnational smuggling routes. The quiet Waterglade industrial estate in Grays, Essex, east of London, suddenly became the epicenter of global attention when the death container was discovered. Meanwhile, in Vietnam, impoverished villages in the central and northern provinces, Nay and Hy Tin, Quang Binh, Hy Phong, Hy Duong, silently bid farewell to their sons and daughters seeking opportunities abroad. Many families mortgaged their homes or borrowed sums as high as $39,000 to secure a ticket for their loved ones to cross borders in search of a better future. These rural regions, among Vietnam's poorest, buzzed with tales of transformation, dreams fueled by stories of lucrative wages in the UK and the sight of grand houses built with remittances sent home. The journey of migrants through these smuggling networks often unfolded in stages. From Vietnam, they might fly to China or Russia, then make their way to Western Europe via Eastern Europe. Many of the Essex victims had flown to Russia, then traveled by road or illicit flights to France or Belgium. In France or Belgium, they gathered in makeshift camps, waiting for their chance to cross the English Channel into the UK. In 2019, Vietnamese nationals were among the largest groups of illegal migrants in the UK, accounting for over 1/10 of those identified as victims of modern slavery in the country. Smuggling rings advertised VIP journeys, supposedly safe passages where, instead of hiding in lorries at great risk, migrants would be escorted across borders by complicit drivers for a premium price. But as the Essex tragedy revealed, these VIP promises were a deadly trap, with human lives traded for maximum profit. The devastating scene of 39 bodies raised agonizing questions. Who led these people to their tragic end inside a refrigerated container? This was no random accident. Behind it lay a calculated system of organized crime. Who were these victims, and how did they end up together in that fateful lorry? Who orchestrated their journey, and why was no one saved in time? Was this a deliberate act of cruelty or the heartbreaking consequence of a transnational smuggling operation driven by greed? The biggest question, who bears responsibility, spurred police in the UK and beyond into a relentless investigation. The pursuit of truth would expose the true faces of the perpetrators while sounding a stark warning about the dangers of illegal migration. At 1:40 a.m. on October 23, 2019, lorry driver Maurice Mo Robinson pulled his red tractor unit to the side of Eastern Avenue in the Waterglade Industrial Estate, Grays, Essex. Robinson had just picked up the container, which had arrived by ferry from Belgium to Purfleet Port about an hour earlier. According to his statement, he heard strange noises from the refrigerated container and stopped to check. But the truth was likely far more complex. Investigations later revealed he had been instructed by his boss. Open the door to let them breathe, but don't let them out. When Robinson opened the container doors, a horrifying scene confronted him. Inside the pitch-black refrigerated container, investigators encountered a collective graveyard. 31 men and 8 women lay lifeless, strewn across the confined space. Some bodies piled atop one another in a compartment just 12 meters long. As the doors opened, a wave of heat and a putrid stench poured out so overwhelming that one officer described white steam rising from the container, signaling the unbearable heat inside. A thermometer later confirmed the temperature inside had reached 101.3 degrees Fahrenheit, 38.5 degrees Celsius, an unimaginable inferno in the cold night air. Robinson staggered back in panic. Instead of immediately calling emergency services, he frantically contacted his accomplices to report the disaster. Security footage captured the lorry circling the industrial estate for 23 minutes before Robinson finally dialed 999 to alert the police. At 1:40 a.m., the emergency line received a disjointed call from the young driver, his voice trembling with panic. I've got a container. It's full of migrants. They're lying all over the floor. None of them are moving. I think they're all gone. When asked how many people were inside, Robinson stammered, "A lot. It's packed with people. I couldn't count them." Police arrived swiftly. The victims' bodies showed early signs of decomposition, emitting a smell one responder likened to rotting garbage, chilling those at the scene. Rescuers stood frozen before the site, faces purpled from suffocation, bodies drenched in sweat, many clad only in thin clothing or partially undressed, despite the container being refrigerated. A desperate attempt to cool themselves in the unbearable heat. Under the cold beam of a flashlight, one officer whispered, "We're standing before a mass grave." The lifeless container had become a coffin, entombing 39 souls. First clues at the scene, police recovered personal belongings, including mobile phones and identification documents. Initially, these documents led authorities to believe the victims were Chinese, prompting an early announcement that all 39 victims were Chinese nationals. But within 24 hours, leads from Vietnam began to emerge. Families across the country reported loved ones missing after attempting to migrate to the UK. Calls from Vietnam flooded Essex police, and phones recovered at the scene rang incessantly with contacts saved in Vietnamese naming conventions. Gradually, the truth unraveled. The victims were not Chinese. They hailed from remote Vietnamese villages, united by a shared dream of a better life in the UK. The family of Tra Mai and Ha Tin revealed they had paid approximately $39,000 to a domestic smuggling network to arrange her passage to the UK. The 26-year-old had been guided to fly to China, then traveled through multiple European countries. Similarly, Hui Hung, a 15-year-old boy, flew from Hanoi to Moscow, Russia on August 26, 2019, then to Paris, France in early October, awaiting his chance to enter the UK. Each victim took a different path, but by mid-October 2019, most of this group had converged in France or Belgium, living in precarious makeshift camps, eagerly awaiting their turn to move on. Previous smuggling attempts had seen the trafficking ring successfully orchestrate multiple crossings. Court proceedings later revealed that in the first half of October 2019, the criminal network executed at least 2 successful trips to the UK on October 11th and 18th, each carrying 10 to 20 people. Victims paid approximately $13,000 to $16,900 per person for the final leg from France or Belgium to the UK, a so-called VIP journey. This meant drivers would actively facilitate the crossing, eliminating the need for migrants to stow away covertly. This promise of a protected passage inspired trust, convincing many to pay the exorbitant fees. Some victims even reassured their families, saying they had secured a VIP trip with a driver's assistance, unaware that the smugglers' greed posed the greatest danger of all. Mid-October brought a setback. On October 14, 2019, at the Eurotunnel checkpoint in France, driver Christopher Kennedy, a member of the smuggling ring, was caught transporting 20 Vietnamese migrants in a lorry. French police removed the group and detained them. At least 2 of those individuals refused to give up, seeking alternative routes and tragically becoming victims of the deadly October 23rd journey. Some had risked their lives twice in just over a week, the 2 trips into one plot. The failed October 14th attempt likely left the smuggling ring with a backlog of clients. Prosecutors later suggested the traffickers decided to cram double the usual number of people into the next trip to compensate. This decision triggered the tragedy. 39 individuals were packed into a single sealed container, far exceeding the numbers of previous journeys. The fateful shipment was covertly organized on the night of October 22, 2019. Robinson staggered back in panic. Instead of immediately calling emergency services, he frantically contacted his accomplices to report the disaster. Security footage captured the lorry circling the industrial estate for 23 minutes before Robinson finally dialed 999 to alert the police. At 1:40 a.m., the emergency line received a disjointed call from the young driver, his voice trembling with panic. "I've got a container. It's full of migrants. They're lying all over the floor. None of them are moving. I think they're all gone." When asked how many people were inside, Robinson stammered, "A lot. It's packed with people. I couldn't count them." Police and medics arrived swiftly. The victims' bodies showed early signs of decomposition, emitting a smell one responder likened to rotting garbage, chilling those at the scene. Rescuers stood frozen before the site, faces purpled from suffocation, bodies drenched in sweat, many clad only in thin clothing or partially undressed, despite the container being refrigerated. A desperate attempt to cool themselves in the unbearable heat. Under the cold beam of a flashlight, one officer whispered, "We're standing before a mass grave." The lifeless container had become a coffin, entombing 39 souls. First clues? At the scene, police recovered personal belongings, including mobile phones and identification documents. Initially, these documents led authorities to believe the victims were Chinese, prompting an early announcement that all 39 victims were Chinese nationals. But within 24 hours, leads from Vietnam began to emerge. Families across the country reported loved ones missing after attempting to migrate to the UK. Calls from Vietnam flooded Essex police, and phones recovered at the scene rang incessantly with contacts saved in Vietnamese naming conventions. Gradually, the truth unraveled. The victims were not Chinese. They hailed from remote Vietnamese villages, united by a shared dream of a better life in the UK. The family of Tra Mai and Ha Tin revealed they had paid approximately $39,000 to a domestic smuggling network to arrange her passage to the UK. The 26-year-old had been guided to fly to China, then traveled through multiple European countries. Similarly, Hui Hung, a 15-year-old boy, flew from Hanoi to Moscow, Russia on August 26, 2019, then to Paris, France in early October, awaiting his chance to enter the UK. Each victim took a different path, but by mid-October 2019, most of this group had converged in France or Belgium, living in precarious makeshift camps, eagerly awaiting their turn to move on. Previous smuggling attempts had seen the trafficking ring successfully orchestrate multiple crossings. Court proceedings later revealed that, in the first half of October 2019, the criminal network executed at least 2 successful trips to the UK on October 11th and 18th, each carrying 10 to 20 people. Victims paid approximately $13,000 to $16,900 per person for the final leg from France or Belgium to the UK, a so-called VIP journey. This meant drivers would actively facilitate the crossing, eliminating the need for migrants to stow away covertly. This promise of a protected passage inspired trust, convincing many to pay the exorbitant fees. Some victims even reassured their families, saying they had secured a VIP trip with a driver's assistance, unaware that the smugglers' greed posed the greatest danger of all. Mid-October brought a setback. On October 14, 2019, at the Eurotunnel checkpoint in France, driver Christopher Kennedy, a member of the smuggling ring, was caught transporting 20 Vietnamese migrants in a lorry. French police removed the group and detained them. At least 2 of those individuals refused to give up, seeking alternative routes and tragically becoming victims of the deadly October 23rd journey. Some had risked their lives twice in just over a week. The 2 trips into one plot, the failed October 14th attempt, likely left the smuggling ring with a backlog of clients. Prosecutors later suggested the traffickers decided to cram double the usual number of people into the next trip to compensate. This decision triggered the tragedy. 39 individuals were packed into a single sealed container, far exceeding the numbers of previous journeys. The fateful shipment was covertly organized on the night of October 22, 2019. After the discovery, Essex police prioritized identifying the 39 victims to notify their families. This was no simple task. They were foreign nationals with no legal identification. Initially, as mentioned, Authorities suspected they were Chinese, even involving the Chinese embassy. However, scattered clues soon pointed to Vietnam. Clues at the scene. Among the recovered belongings were a few forged passports and IDs, some bearing Chinese names. But the mobile phones told a different story. Amid the crowded, lifeless bodies, phones buzzed incessantly. Investigators noticed caller IDs with Vietnamese names like Mom, Brother, or Darling Wife. One phone held an unsent message in Vietnamese. Traumise, I'm sorry, Mom. These details were immediately relayed to coordinating authorities. Parallel to the investigation in the UK, in late October 2019, families in Vietnam whose loved ones had gone missing reported their concerns to local authorities. Provinces like Nay and Ca Tin, Quang Binh, and Hai Phong compiled lists of suspected victims and sent them to the UK for cross-referencing. The Vietnamese embassy in London dispatched personnel to Essex to assist with identification. On November 7, 2019, Essex police officially confirmed that all 39 victims were Vietnamese, ranging in age from 15 to 44. Their identities were verified through DNA matching with relatives and photo recognition. The identification process was deeply moving. At the morgue in Broomfield Hospital, UK, one victim's phone rang incessantly, parents in Vietnam calling in vain, hoping for a response. Investigators fought back tears, knowing the deceased was likely the person sought by those desperate calls. In Vietnam, families waited in anguish. For example, the parents of 15-year-old Nguyen Huy Hung in Ca Tin, already working in the UK, were sitting on pins and needles after losing contact with their son. Hung's sister posted a plea on Facebook detailing his journey from Russia to France before boarding a lorry to the UK on October 21st. When the victim list was released, hope vanished, replaced by heart-wrenching sobs across two nations. Piecing it together, with identities confirmed, the investigation shifted to tracing the container's journey and the roles of those involved. But first, we must reflect on the victims, individuals who risked everything on this fateful journey. The victims were not faceless. They had names, families, dreams, and personal stories. Their biographies are woven into the narrative to underscore the profound pain they endured. Below are a few representative stories, emblematic of the shared tragedy. Tra Mai, 26, Ca Tin. Tra Mai was the youngest child in a poor working-class family. Determined to ease her parents' burdens, she set out for the UK to earn money. Her family mortgaged their land to pay $39,000 to smugglers. Tra Mai traveled from China to France. Her brother revealed she had attempted to cross into the UK on October 19th, but was caught and sent back to France. Undeterred, the young woman tried again on October 22nd, a journey that became her last. Before her death, she sent her mother a haunting farewell text. Tra Mai's image, a gentle, dutiful daughter lying among 38 compatriots in a foreign land, became a poignant symbol of the tragedy. Jean Luong, 20, Ca Tin. Luong arrived in France early, hoping to reach the UK to work as a nail technician. His family last heard from him in mid-October, when he reported the final leg to the UK would cost around $14,300. Having spent time in France, Luong persuaded a friend from his hometown to join him. In a recording found on his phone, Luong's choked voice apologized, blaming himself. "It's all my fault." The remorse in his words pierced listeners' hearts. He died as his dreams were just beginning to take shape. Vinh Hung, 19, Nguyen Hung, the youngest of 4 siblings, was the family's brightest student. After her father's death left debts, she resolved to go to the UK to support her family. Leaving her job at a local clothing shop, and Hung's friends pooled money to help cover her smuggling fees. She planned to work in a nail salon, live frugally, and send money home to her mother. Friends called her Anna and recalled her excitement for the future. Tragically, that future ended in the cold container. Huy Hung, 15, Ha Tin. One of the 2 youngest victims, Hung died before reaching adulthood. His parents, possibly undocumented workers in the UK, inspired his dream to reunite with them. Despite his youth, Hung was mature, excelled in languages, and was passionate about English football. His parents said he dreamed of setting foot on England's pitches, even teaching himself English to prepare. His nearly 2-month journey through Russia and Europe ended at the UK's doorstep. His parents called his loss too sudden. Our son never got to fulfill his dreams. Jean Bin, 15, Haiphong, and Nak Hugh, 17, Hai Duong, both still school-aged. Bin and Hugh's presence in the container shocked many. Less is known about their stories, but the fact that such young teens were among the victims was staggering. Reports suggested one victim under 20 had escaped a refugee camp in the Netherlands before heading to the UK, possibly Hugh or another youth. This indicates some had wandered through multiple European countries, even seeking asylum before continuing their perilous journey. Nak, then 44, Nyan, and T, then 41, Haiphong. The oldest victims both had families and children. At an age when they should have been pillars for their households, poverty and joblessness drove them to a final gamble. Then, female, was a devoted mother, determined to fund her children's education. Then, male, known as an Lin Gosh, then traveled with a cousin, both perishing. They represent middle-aged individuals desperate for economic relief, risking everything on a slim hope. Man Hung, 37, Ha Tin, and Fan, then 37, Hai Tin. Both were family breadwinners with young children. For the sake of their family's survival, they left their wives and kids with promises to soon send money home. Then was remembered as a devoted father. The thought of their children waiting for a better life, only to lose their fathers forever, is heart-wrenching. These biographies are but a few of the 39 tragic stories. Each name represents an unfulfilled dream. Some aspired to own nail salons, others to work in restaurants. And one young man dreamed of becoming a footballer. They were husbands, wives, children, parents, everything to their families. Their loss is not just a number, but 39 shattered families, 39 grieving lineages, and a stunned community. Following the discovery, Essex police launched the largest criminal investigation in the county's history. The container scene was sealed off, with forensic experts meticulously collecting evidence. Autopsies confirmed all 39 died from asphyxia and hyperthermia in the confined space. No signs of violent trauma were found, supporting the theory that this was not intentional murder, but the result of inhumane transport conditions. Fingerprints and DNA were collected to aid identification and cross-referencing with relatives in Vietnam. To trace the container's journey, Essex police collaborated with UK and Belgian port authorities. They confirmed the container, identified by its serial number, was shipped from Zeebrugge, Belgium, on the October 22nd overnight ferry. Port security footage showed the container being hauled to Zeebrugge by driver Eamon Harrison, a 23-year-old from Northern Ireland, on the afternoon of October 22nd. Harrison was identified as the driver who delivered the container to the ferry. A Europe-wide arrest warrant for Harrison was issued immediately. In the UK, CCTV footage from Perth Fleet Port showed Morris Robinson's red tractor unit picking up the container around 12:30 a.m. on October 23rd. Cameras also captured Robinson driving away, stopping at Waterglade Industrial Estate around 1:05 a.m., moments before opening the container. This established a clear timeline. The container entered the UK at 12:30 a.m., and the deaths were discovered by 1:40 a.m., meaning the tragedy unfolded before Robinson took possession. Initial arrests on October 23, 2019, Essex police arrested Morris Robinson at the scene on suspicion of manslaughter of 39 people. Robinson initially denied involvement, claiming he merely discovered deceased migrants in the lorry. However, phone evidence showed that after opening the container, he contacted two numbers, one belonging to Ronan Hughes, head of a transport company in Ireland, and another to Jorganica, a Romanian in the UK. This implicated Robinson in the smuggling plan. Within 48 hours, police arrested 3 more suspects, including a man at Stansted Airport attempting to flee the UK, later identified as Jorganica. A couple linked to a transport company was also detained, but later released due to insufficient evidence of direct involvement. Expanding the investigation to Ireland and Europe, phone call evidence led to Ronan Hughes, a 40-year-old Northern Irish transport company owner. The tractor unit used by Robinson belonged to Hughes' company. Hughes and Robinson were already acquainted. UK police coordinated with authorities in Northern Ireland, and Belgium's federal police. Belgian prosecutors opened a parallel investigation since the container passed through their territory. A theory emerged. This was a transnational smuggling network involving individuals in the UK, Northern Ireland, Belgium, France, and possibly Vietnam. Technical evidence. Examining Robinson's phone, police found a message from Hughes sent on the evening of October 22nd. Call logs between Robinson, Hughes, Nika, and Harrison revealed ongoing communication during prior smuggling trips. GPS data from the lorry confirmed Robinson's involvement in smuggling runs on October 11th and 18th. Traffic cameras on the M25 motorway captured a convoy led by Nika, collecting migrants from a container on October 18th. A successful trip, corroborating witness accounts of Nika's presence at prior drop-off points. Belgian police provided further evidence. Zeebrugge port cameras from October 22nd showed figures climbing into the container before it was sealed and loaded onto the ferry. Port management confirmed the container was sealed with a lead seal, making escape impossible during transit. This supported the hypothesis. The 39 victims were inside throughout the ferry journey and died before reaching the UK. Chilling testimony and evidence. During the investigation, disturbing details emerged from the smugglers' messages. Upon learning of the container's cargo disaster, Christopher Kennedy, caught in France on October 14th, texted a friend, "Must have stuffed too many in. No air left," as if anticipating the cause. Another conspirator callously remarked, "This trip's done for." These cold messages became damning evidence, showing the smugglers were aware of the risks but prioritized profit. Phone location data placed Gower and Nika near Waterglade Industrial Estate during the early hours of October 23rd, coinciding with Robinson's presence. After learning of the deaths, Nika fled to Europe but was arrested at Frankfurt Airport, Germany in late January 2020 under an international warrant. The picture clarified. The deaths of 39 people were not an isolated act but a failure in a larger smuggling chain. UK, Belgian and Irish police uncovered that the network had operated since 2018, successfully smuggling hundreds of Vietnamese into the UK. Ronan Hughes led the transport arm in Europe, collaborating with Gower and Nika to manage pickups and distribution in the UK. Eamon Harrison and other drivers, including Christopher Kennedy and Maurice Robinson, were hired to transport the containers. In Vietnam, recruiters collected fees and funneled victims to the network. In May 2020, Vietnamese police arrested suspects Nay En and Ha Tin for organizing illegal migration, targeting the intermediaries who sent the 39 victims to their deaths. Ultimately, 11 people in the UK and 19 in Belgium were convicted in connection to the Essex tragedy, with additional sentences in Vietnam and France. This international investigation was described as unprecedented for Essex police. They collaborated with 4 governments, dozens of law enforcement agencies, and raced against time to apprehend key suspects before they could flee. Their coordinated efforts bore fruit. The entire human trafficking network responsible for the 39 victims was brought to justice. Through the investigation, the key perpetrators emerged clearly. They did not wield weapons to take lives, but their greed and callousness led 39 people to a point of no return. Each played a role in the machinery of crime. Ronan Hughes, 41, Northern Ireland. The ringleader, Hughes owned a transport company that operated a double life, hauling legitimate goods like sweets and soft drinks as a front while smuggling alcohol, tobacco, and people across borders. Hughes coordinated drivers and scheduled lorry routes. His motive was pure profit. Each migrant paid him around $13,000 for the final crossing, while his costs, ferry fees, and driver payments were negligible, yielding profits of hundreds of thousands per trip. Driven by greed, Hughes ordered 39 people crammed into one container to maximize earnings, heedless of the deadly risks. When the tragedy struck, he fled to Ireland, but realizing escape was futile, surrendered in April 2020. He pleaded guilty to 39 counts of manslaughter. Ioria Nika, 43, Romania. Hughes' primary accomplice in the UK, Nika, a former lorry mechanic, was well-versed in covert transport. Living in Essex, he managed the reception of smuggled migrants in the UK, organizing 16-seater vans to collect them from drop-off points and arranging safe houses. On October 23rd, Nika was at Waterglade to receive the cargo, but fled when the disaster unfolded. Arrested later, he stubbornly denied manslaughter, admitting only to organizing smuggling as if distancing himself from the deaths. However, damning evidence, texts, and calls with Hughes and drivers proved his complicity. Nika's motive was also profit, earning thousands per successful migrant. He once coldly texted a driver, "Don't let them out, just open the door." Maurice Mo Robinson, 26, Northern Ireland. The driver who discovered the tragedy, Robinson was a key link in the network. Young and lured by quick money, he was paid $32,500 in cash for the October 22nd job. His role was to wait in the UK, retrieve the container from the ferry, and drive to the drop-off for Nika's team. Robinson knew migrants were inside. He had succeeded in a similar run on October 18th. When he opened the container and found 39 lifeless bodies, he was gripped by panic. His 23-minute delay in calling emergency services revealed his concern for self-preservation over the victims. Nonetheless, Robinson cooperated with police after his arrest, providing details about the network. Eamon Harrison, 24, Northern Ireland. The driver for the Belgium leg, Harrison transported the 39 victims to the ferry. He had been involved in prior smuggling runs, driving legitimate cargo to Europe, and smuggling people on return trips. On October 22nd, he delivered the container to Zeebrugge port, logging it as a standard refrigerated shipment. He likely heard or knew people were inside. A witness saw him accept payment from migrants before they entered. His motive was quick cash, earning far more than regular haulage jobs. When the case broke, Harrison fled to Northern Ireland but was arrested under a European warrant. He denied responsibility, claiming he didn't know the migrants could die, but the jury rejected his defense. Christopher Kennedy, 24, Northern Ireland. Though not directly involved in the October 23rd trip, Kennedy was a driver in the network, responsible for earlier runs. He was caught in France on October 14th with 20 Vietnamese migrants. Kennedy had successfully smuggled people into the UK multiple times, which led to complacency and his French arrest. After the Essex tragedy, he fled but was apprehended in late 2019. He claimed, "I was just transporting goods. I didn't know." But phone records showed frequent contact with Hughes and Nika about shipments. For Kennedy, the lure was money. Years as a driver yielded little, but a single smuggling run could earn thousands. Valentin Colota, 38, Romania. Colota handled transporting migrants from Essex drop-off points to London. He had driven a group safely to London in a prior run. On October 23rd, he was slated to assist but didn't act before the tragedy unraveled. Colota was arrested and admitted to aiding illegal immigration. Alexandru Hanga, 28, Romania. Another taxi driver in the network, Hanga performed similar tasks to Colota in an earlier run. He pleaded guilty and was convicted for his role. The perpetrator's shared motive was the enormous profit from human trafficking. Each victim was merely a commodity worth tens of thousands of dollars. Greed blinded them to the obvious risks of cramming people like objects into a sealed container. At trial, the judge declared this was all about greed. This conspiracy was driven by financial gain. The defendants claimed they didn't intend to kill, but they ignored human lives when they chose to pack 39 people into an airtight space. The case was tried publicly at the Old Bailey Criminal Court in London, drawing global attention. The main trial occurred in late 2020 after over a year of investigation and case preparation. 7 key defendants faced trial in the UK: Hughes, Nika, Harrison, Robinson, Kennedy, Colota, and Hanga. Others had pleaded guilty earlier, avoiding contested trials. The prosecution described the case as a humanitarian tragedy and highlighted the defendants' inhumanity. Prosecutor Bill Emlyn Jones told the jury, "This is the painful truth. Some are willing to do anything to bring people into the UK for a life, for about $13,000 per head. And whenever you pack a sealed container with people for hours with no escape, no communication, that carries a risk of death. He described the victims' final moments as like hell on earth, with the container becoming their tomb due to the smugglers' greed and negligence. Defense lawyers tried to deflect blame. Ronan Hughes, who pleaded guilty to manslaughter, had his lawyer argue for leniency, citing his remorse and lack of intent for such catastrophic consequences. George Anika denied manslaughter, his lawyer arguing he only provided transport services without intending harm. Eamon Harrison's team also denied manslaughter, claiming he believed the container had ventilation or would be opened in time, not foreseeing the deadly outcome. They stressed his youth and inexperience, claiming he was drawn in by Hughes. Morris Robinson, having pleaded guilty early, faced little trial debate. His lawyer sought leniency for his cooperation and trauma from the event. Kennedy, Kalota, and Hanga admitted to aiding immigration but denied knowing the risks of death. Overwhelming evidence silenced their defenses. The prosecution showed CCTV footage of Robinson opening the container with steam pouring out, a sign of extreme heat inside. They played the victims' final recorded messages, reducing the courtroom to tears. The prosecutor asked, the defendants claimed they didn't intend to kill, but what did they do when they heard cries for help from the container? Silence was their answer. No one acted. Justice Sweeney ruled, though they didn't directly kill, the defendants' callousness left 39 people to die in excruciating agony. He stressed the must deter. As migration control affects society, economy, and national security, the public is outraged by this cruelty. In December 2020, the jury convicted George Anika and Eamon Harrison of 39 counts of manslaughter and conspiracy to smuggle people. Ronan Hughes and Morris Robinson had already pleaded guilty to manslaughter. Christopher Kennedy and Valentin Kalota were convicted of conspiracy to smuggle. Alexandru Hanga was similarly convicted. On January 22, 2021, the court delivered stern sentences. George Anika, 27 years for 39 counts of manslaughter and conspiracy. Ronan Hughes, 20 years reduced for guilty plea. Eamon Harrison, 18 years. Morris Robinson, 13 years and 4 months. Christopher Kennedy, 7 years. Valentin Kalota, 4.5 years. Alexandru Hanga, Trey Annie. The defendants collectively faced over 90 years in prison, a fitting reflection of the UK's justice system. The judge declared, these sentences reflect the inhumanity of the traffickers and the gravity of their crimes. As the verdicts echoed, the courtroom fell silent. Many victims' relatives present wept quietly. Though the sentences couldn't bring loved ones back, they offered a measure of justice and solace that the perpetrators faced consequences. Post-trial, public attention waned, but the pain in Vietnam lingered. In late November 2019, the 39 victims' bodies were repatriated by plane from the UK to Vietnam. Black-draped coffins landed at Noi Bai Airport in the dead of night, followed by long journeys back to their villages. Residents described sleepless nights in Nay An and Ha Tin as entire communities stayed awake, awaiting the hearses carrying their loved ones. Wails pierced the cold night with candles and incense illuminating rural hamlets. No one could hold back tears at the sight of white-haired parents burying their young. An unbearable grief. The Vietnamese government covered repatriation costs and organized communal funerals, but the loss will haunt survivors for years. The deaths of 39 Vietnamese in the container shook the world. BBC, CNN, and European outlets ran front-page stories, calling it the worst migrant tragedy in the UK in decades. Early diplomatic tensions arose when media misreported the victims as Chinese, but once confirmed as Vietnamese, focus shifted to the plight of their families. Western reports asked, why, with Vietnam's growing economy, do young people risk their lives to leave? The answer lay in their dreams of a better life. The case sparked debate about UK and EU immigration policies. Does tightening borders deter illegal migration, or does it push migrants toward deadlier routes? From a criminal perspective, the severe sentences sent a warning to other trafficking networks. The UK will not tolerate such crimes and will pursue international cooperation to prosecute offenders. Yet supply meets demand. As long as poverty persists at home and people are willing to pay for a better life abroad, criminal networks will thrive. The root solution lies in creating livelihoods in home countries and raising awareness to avoid falling for false promises. The 2019 Essex tragedy is a modern human catastrophe where people became victims of circumstance and greed. These young individuals left with grand aspirations, only to return in cold coffins. As one Essex police officer said, choking back tears, each of them had a family left behind. They were promised a safe passage, but they were betrayed. They were abandoned to die because of the greed of those convicted today. And so, today's case concludes. The deaths of 39 Vietnamese are not just a crime story, but a stark reminder of the perils of illegal migration. It's a warning that behind promises of easy jobs and high pay abroad may lurk a trap, that the European dream can come at the cost of life itself. May the painful sacrifice of these 39 compatriots not be in vain. May it awaken others so no one else must send desperate messages like, "I'm sorry, Mom, I can't breathe," from the depths of despair. As the rain falls and the night deepens, thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.